Chapter 781, Pity. Hiroshi shook his head and said, "It means they were sure Iwagakure wouldn't make a move. Either that, or they have a different arrangement to take care of Iwagakure in case they attack." Kusagakure's council members glanced at each other, confirming that they weren't the only ones having such a hard time believing it. Even so, no one had any point to disprove their leader's words. In mere seconds, they experienced a range of emotion. Strangely, the last emotion they felt was relief. Indeed, they were relieved that they took this opportunity to mend their relationship with Fujin. A large-scale war wasn't the appropriate place to test his students, so Fujin had kept them out of the attack on the base of Kusagakure rebels. He didn't want to see any of them die to a stray kunai or shuriken. On the contrary, the smaller bases in the land of rice presented a perfect opportunity to give them some experience. Under Banjiro and Fujin's careful watch, they participated in almost every battle and killed at least a dozen Audiogakure ninjas each. Thanks to the time they spent under Danzo's care, Fujin didn't need to worry about them adjusting to killing like Renjiro once did with his squad. On the battlefield, his 5 students were like fish released into the sea. The Odo ninja hatefully said, "You cursed brats! Orochimaru-sama wouldn't spare you. You may think you have won, but he will avenge us. Ha ha ha, leave the rest of your miserable life in the fear of not knowing when we'll strike you." Despite his threatening tone, there wasn't a hint of fear on the faces of Fujin's students. Instead, Yuji teased, "You sure have a lot of confidence in your boss. It's almost as if we didn't destroy his main base." Heh! Yuji's taunt sent the Audigakure's ninjas rage through the roof. He wanted to respond, but no words formed in his mouth. After all, what Yuji said was true. Memories surfaced in the Audigakure ninja's mind. A few hours ago, he was at the main base where Orochimaru handled matters related to Audigakure. Of course, due to the wounds inflicted by Hiruzen, Orochimaru was more focused on nursing his injuries instead of managing the hidden village. Even though Fujin had killed Kabuto and sealed his Edo Tensei, Orochimaru still had quite a few capable medical ninjas who were working round the clock to heal him, granted they were a considerable distance away from Kabuto's level. Despite not attaching himself to any subordinate, Orochimaru felt his absence. The Audigakure ninja expected Orochimaru to stay there until his condition stabilized, but he recalled the change in Orochimaru's expression when he learnt that the Konoha army led by Suzuki Fujin had found their main base. Without a moment's hesitation, Orochimaru decided to abandon the base. He escaped with some of his subordinates while sending the rest in a different direction to divert the attention of Konoha ninjas. The tactic successfully threw Fujin off his tail, but raised doubts about Orochimaru's capabilities in the hearts of his followers. His godlike image fell considerably. Seeing the hesitant expression on the face of the Audigakure ninja, Yuji grinned and continued, "How about you stop dreaming and tell us where your leader ran away like a scared little girl? I'll see." Sayaka interrupted him. "That's enough playing around. Focus on the mission." Needless to say, they had no reason to trust his words. On the other hand, his memories wouldn't tell any lies. Just as they stepped close to him to knock him out, a grin appeared on his face, alarming Fujin's students. The Audigakure ninja thought, "It is exactly as Orochimaru-sama said. You want to read my memories? Ha ha ha, be my guest." At the next moment, he exploded. It wasn't a simple explosion from explosive tags. Instead, Orochimaru inscribed several explosive tags on him before he escaped. His body blew up from the inside out, destroying his brain in the process. No one could read the memories from his brain any longer. Shoma muttered nervously, "That was scary, he almost got us." Hikari agreed, "Yes, if Sensei hadn't taught us to flicker without hand seals, we'd be dead." Takeshi muttered, "That was surprising. I didn't feel any explosive tags on him." There weren't any. Instead, the seals were inscribed on his body directly. The 5 kids turned their heads and saw Fujin standing right behind them. Sayaka sighed and muttered, "We failed. He looked like the main guy they left behind. He must have had some information about Orochimaru's movements, which is why he exploded himself." Fujin nodded and said, "Never forget this. When you are on the battlefield, be it in an all-out war or a rank D mission, never look down on your opponent, never gloat, and never become overconfident. If you had focused on knocking him out instead of humiliating him, you would have succeeded." They immediately became dejected. Despite doing so well in the last 5 days, they messed up at the very end. The Konoha army had compiled a large amount of information from several clues obtained by reading the memories of hundreds of ninjas to find the location of the main base. It wasn't an easy task. Had they succeeded in eliminating Orochimaru, it would have been a major accomplishment. Unfortunately, Orochimaru had escaped and Konoha no longer had any leads. Yuji sincerely said, "Sorry, Sensei, it was my mistake." Banjiro, who was nearby, thought, Well, killing Orochimaru was extremely unlikely anyway, so it wasn't exactly a huge mistake. Destroying all his bases and forcing him out of the land of rice are huge achievements by themselves. The revenge for the attack on our village can be considered complete. Konomi and her subordinates had the same thought. To their surprise, Fujin bluntly said, "It was." Konomi's eyes twitched as she thought, does he need to be so harsh? That boy is barely 10 years old. All of them did splendidly in the battle. Besides, it's obvious that he was planning to blow himself up. He was just waiting for the right moment. Without a powerful genjutsu or a good surprise attack, it was impossible to capture him alive. Even then, Orochimaru wouldn't leave such a vulnerability behind. Fujin continued, however, there are a few other means that you still need to be aware of. Fujin's students were confused and glanced at their sensei. However, Fujin had already disappeared. They quickly turned their gaze towards the spot of the explosion where Fujin was standing next to the remains of the Otogakure ninja. To their surprise, chakra flowed through Fujin's right palm and he made a grabbing gesture. "What is that?" Takeshi muttered unsurely. Like others, he had noticed Fujin making a grabbing gesture, but it looked like Fujin merely grabbed air. However, Takeshi could see something else. It wasn't clear, but it felt like Fujin was holding something. Fujin asked in surprise, "Can you see it?" Takeshi answered, "Not clearly. It's just that it feels thicker than just air or winds, a bit like mist, but not that either." His words surprised his fellow students, who inquired, "What do you mean?" Takeshi wasn't sure, but Fujin said, "It looks like you have some talent in the yin release. Either that or the rest of you have been slacking off in yin and yang manipulation training." Fujin gazed at the other four, who shivered involuntarily. Hikari quickly said, "I'm sure it's Takeshi's talent, sensei." Yuji immediately added, "She's correct. We didn't slack off, sensei." Fujin said, "Well, to be sure, I'll be doubling your training in this aspect so that the four of you can catch up to Takeshi." Banjiro and Konomi watched speechlessly as Fujin's remaining four students looked at Takeshi with eyes full of complaints. Needless to say, none of them dared to voice their complaints. They were sure Fujin would triple it if they did so. Takeshi sighed in relief, internally thinking that he was safe. Unfortunately for him, Fujin continued, "Just in case they haven't been slacking and you're just talented, your training will be doubled too, Takeshi. After all, it'd be embarrassing if others catch up with you in the aspects you're talented in, right?" It was Takeshi's turn to suffer. The poor boy could only nod obediently, no matter how unwilling he was. His fellow students watched his misery with glee. While they were going to suffer, it definitely felt better when all of them suffered together. Konomi's eyes twitched as she realized, no wonder they're so strong. Fujin explained, "Anyway, what I'm holding is this ninja's soul. This is an application of a technique created by Lord Second and later improved by Kato Dan. Though it's a bit tricky and very dangerous, this technique can be used to read memories too. Fortunately, the soul takes some time to depart after the body dies." Fujin began reading his memories directly from his soul, while others observed with a deadpan expression. The same thought ran through their minds. So, even though he destroyed his brain, it was a useless sacrifice. The Otogakure ninja could have never expected that his remains would be looked at with pity by the very same Konoha ninjas he tried to kill. Chapter 782, Annexing the Land of Rice. "Is everything all right, Orochimaru-sama?" While Fujin read the memories of the Otogakure ninja, Orochimaru's group was focused on running away. However, Kimimaro noticed a sudden change in Orochimaru's expression. Orochimaru answered, "The group we left behind was eliminated." The mood of the group dulled a bit. In the last few days, their forces had suffered extensively. Not only was the attack unexpected, but Konoha ninjas hadn't shown a shred of mercy during their operation. Kimimaro said, "It doesn't matter. As long as you can recover, we will rise again, Orochimaru-sama." Orochimaru thought, "I couldn't care less of those useless fools. They served their purpose by securing my escape route. However, why hasn't Manda been responding to my summons? I can't summon any snakes at all. Did something happen to the Ryucha cave, or is this also the consequence of Sensei's blow?" Amachi, the medical ninja who tried healing Orochimaru, agreed, "He is correct, Orochimaru-sama. Though our forces here were destroyed, the true foundation of Otogakure is you, and Konoha can only dream of killing you. Besides," a smirk appeared on his face as he said, "we finally have a lead about Tsunade. Not bad, you have come a long way. I didn't think you'd last so long against me or be able to injure me," Kajero said with a hint of surprise and respect in his voice. A large cut could be seen across his left cheek, almost exposing his teeth. His right arm was bleeding as well. Facing him, Illumi wasn't in a good state either. His breathing was much rougher. Several cuts had opened up on his body while his left arm had been electrocuted not too long ago. Kajero added, "No matter. Even if I can't kill you myself, I'll do it soon. Once Tsukaro is done with the Hyuga boy, it'll be your turn." Illumi chuckled and said, "You seem to have made a miscalculation." Kajero shook his head and said, "It's because you Konoha ninjas are too arrogant. If your commander had made a move, we'd have been wiped out by now. However, he thinks it's beneath him to fight us. Of course, if he makes a move now, then it'll still be the same result. Even if I kill you, it likely wouldn't change the result of this war. However," Illumi cut him off and said, "No, you seem to have miscalculated who the weaker general is." "Huh!" A frown appeared on Kajero's face. Suddenly his eyes widened and he quickly turned around and shot sharp water jets. To his shock, the person moving towards him was none other than Hoka. He thought he dealt with Tsukaro so quickly. Fuck, that's what Illumi meant. Unlike Illumi and Konomi, Hoka wasn't an elite jounin officially. Hence, Kajero expected him to be the weakest of the three generals and assumed that he was only given the position due to his closeness to Fujin and Renjiro. As such, he wanted Tsukaro to kill him while he would kill one of the other two. He knew they would still lose, but killing two of Konoha's generals would send a message throughout the land of grass, which was Kajero's goal. Unfortunately, he made a small miscalculation as Illumi said. Hoka dodged the water jets and said, "You're in my range." 8 trigrams, 64 palms technique. Kajero cursed, "Shit, I can't fight him in close range." Chakra gathered around his hands and transformed into winds. However, before he could do anything, a tree appeared under him and trapped him once again. He immediately disrupted his chakra, but that short delay was all Hoka needed. Fujin clenched his fist, crushing the Otagakyur ninja's weakening soul and sending him into the afterlife. Konomi asked, "Did you find the path Orochimaru took, Commander?" Fujin replied, "He said he was heading into a base he has in the southern parts of the land of hot water." Banjiro, Fujin's students, and the other Konoha ninjas around Fujin were surprised. They didn't expect him to find a clue. Only Konomi was slightly doubtful. Even so, she said, "That's good, I'll reorganize the army and we'll head there right away." However, Fujin shook his head and said, "Don't bother." Sayaka asked in confusion, "Why not, Sensei?" Fujin chuckled and asked, "If you are running away from an enemy that can easily kill you, would you tell everyone where you are heading?" Sayaka blushed due to overlooking something so simple. She said, "I didn't think of that. I wouldn't do that. Orochimaru should have given him wrong information to mislead us or to lure us into some trap." Fujin nodded and said, "Whatever it isn't worth the effort to look into." Konomi agreed with Fujin's analysis. She asked, "Does it mean this operation is finally over?" Fujin answered, "Almost. Did you dispatch forces to investigate the area I ordered?" Konomi nodded and answered, "Yes, our forces seem to have discovered some traces but didn't find anyone." Fujin replied, "Good, I'll look into it myself. What about the daimyo of the land of rice? Did he respond?" Konomi answered, "Yes, he agreed to all our demands. He even expressed eagerness to meet you." Needless to say, the daimyo had abandoned the country and escaped once Orochimaru took over the land of rice. While he respected the samurais, he had no confidence in their strength to protect him from Orochimaru. While killing a daimyo would result in other daimyos exerting their influence on the hidden villages to take action against the culprit, he didn't think Orochimaru would care about being hunted down. With Orochimaru continuously strengthening his hold over the country, he had completely given hope. However, Fujin's sudden operation ignited his hopes. He was still suspicious of Konoha's plans, but when he received a scroll from Fujin, he agreed to all the conditions without a second's hesitation. Fuji giggled and mischievously asked, "Will we take over the land of rice?" His giggles were stifled when all the senior ninjas stared at him. He wondered, "Why are they staring at me like that?" Banjiro coughed and said, "Yuji, you should never say things like that openly. If someone hears them, it can create several diplomatic issues." Not wanting to attract unrequired trouble, Yuji obediently nodded. However, everyone was left speechless when Fujin said, "Don't worry, I had the same idea." The gazes transferred from Yuji to Fujin as the Konoha ninjas cried in their hearts, "Even if you have that idea, don't say it out loud." Fujin sighed and added, "Unfortunately, Shikaku-san opposed the idea as it'll cut through some important routes." Konomi thought, "Yeah, it'll cut off the path between the land of earth and the land of lightning, meaning the two villages will focus all their strength on Konoha. It would make things too disadvantageous for us." She asked, "Will you meet with the daimyo?" Fujin answered, "No, ask the village to send a diplomatic team. I'll handle those pests now." He did what? Much like the rest of the world, the Konoha Council was shocked by the sudden change of events. Except for Shikaku, not a single one was aware of Fujin's actions in the land of rice. In fact, they were all under the impression that he was leading Konoha's army in the land of grass. Amura asked in a worried tone, "If Fujin is the land of rice, then who is deterring Iwagakure in the land of grass?" Shikaku replied, "I calculated that the third Tsuchikage wouldn't make a move unprovoked. Besides, the outrageous nature of this move is a deterrent in itself." Everyone in the council agreed. The move was so strange and outrageous that it would force anyone to analyze it a dozen times before making a move. And the more they explore, the more misconceptions they will develop. It was exactly what Anoki felt. The more he thought, the more nefarious schemes he discovered, even though there were none. After all, who would believe a village led by the likes of Hiruzen and Danzo wouldn't have hundreds of dark schemes running continuously? Their work, along with what their sensei did, had left so many scars on the enemies of Konoha that they would look at it suspiciously even if a saint led it for a decade. Hiramasa sighed and muttered, "As expected of you, Shikaku. Your mind always amazes me." Shikaku chuckled and said, "This one wasn't my idea. Fujin suggested it. I just gave the permission." His words once again surprised the council. Inoichi thoughtfully said, "If that's the case, then he is quite good at strategizing." Shikaku nodded. "Yes, his strategic acumen is very high. He is a natural at discovering paths that would either benefit the village or be very painful for our enemies. The only issue is that the ideas he has are generally very high risk in nature. However, they also have high rewards, which makes them acceptable if pulled off right, like in this case." Chapter 783, Chaos in the Ninja World 1. Everyone understood Shikaku's words. While Fujin's sudden decision to attack the Land of Rice was very good, it had several pitfalls. Any one of them could force Konoha into a difficult position. The first pitfall was information. Konoha's army was vulnerable in the Land of Grass, as a far stronger Iwagakure army stood close to their location. So it was important that no one knew about Fujin's maneuver and the fact that he was in the Land of Rice. Considering that even Konoha's council was in the dark, Fujin did a very good job at it. The second pitfall was the Otagakure forces. Fujin had to ensure that they were wiped out. If he failed to eliminate enough bases or kill enough ninjas, or if his forces were repelled by their resistance, it would be a huge blow to Konoha's reputation. Instead of deterring their enemies, the failure would embolden them. The worst-case scenario would be if Konoha's forces were embroiled in a complicated war in the Land of Rice. If they had been forced to send reinforcements, Kumagakure and Iwagakure could have decided to take a risk. However, Fujin had pulled it off perfectly, and Anoki had acted as he and Shikaku predicted. Hence, Konoha could now enjoy the rewards of the outrageous move. Destroying Otagakure had far-reaching implications. Nearly all of them were beneficial for Konoha. The only real downside was that the other villages would be more wary of Konoha in the next Great War. However, that was rather ordinary for Konoha, and it changed nothing. Even without this incident, the council made plans to deal with all 4 great villages while cooperating with the minor villages. The absence of a hostile minor village on their border made this planning easier. The council immediately began preparing for the aftermath of the 2 operations. They formed a diplomatic team and dispatched them to the Land of Rice. While Konoha wouldn't annex the Land of Rice, the daimyo would be forever indebted to Konoha and Fujin. The council wouldn't let go of such an opportunity. In the coming days, the Land of Rice would be subservient to the Land of Fire, almost akin to a vassal state. While the Konoha Council became busy making that a reality, Kumagakure ninjas set up a camp on the northern coast of the Land of Hot Water. In a tent, Darui worriedly asked, "How many ninjas have returned?" Samui answered, "So far, only 36 have returned. The remaining 294 should be on their way." She advised, "We just sent the order. It'll take some time." Darui muttered, "I know, it's just that I have a bad feeling." When Konoha's forces moved into the Land of Grass, Ai intensified his efforts in the Land of Rice. He believed that Orochimaru was still loyal to Konoha and wanted to clip their wings by eliminating one of the students of the Third Hokage. As such, he sent over 300 ninjas to investigate the locations of their bases. He also dispatched the Darui's team, along with Yujito, to oversee the operation and handle the situation in case things heated up. In addition, he was planning to make a move himself once they had concrete information. However, unlike his previous expedition, he planned to let B stay in the village in case Akuro decided to show up once again. However, the presence of Konoha's army caught the Kumagakure leadership off guard, also raised doubts over their speculation about Orochimaru's loyalties. I ordered an immediate retreat of his forces. However, things were concerning for Kumagakure. Their forces had been active in the Land of Rice for over a week, yet they hadn't received a single message about the presence of Konoha ninjas in the Land of Grass. That was a huge cause of worry for Kumagakure. After all, the memories of the missing ninjas and Akuro's actions were still fresh in the minds of Kumagakure citizens. If they suffered more losses with nothing to show for it, chaos would erupt once again and Ai's position would become even weaker. C was about to reassure Darui when he suddenly became alert. Darui asked, "What did you sense?" C answered, "That's strange. I sensed 11 ninjas heading towards us, and I'm not familiar with any of their chakra signatures. However, one of them feels oddly familiar, but I can't put my finger on who it is. Darui, Samui, and Yujiro frowned. Darui said, "Let's check it out." The ninjas immediately flickered. Some distance away, Orochimaru frowned and asked, "Whose chakra field was that?" The sensor in his group answered, "Orochimaru-sama, I can't sense anyone yet." Orochimaru frowned. "That means the sensor is better than him. However, who could it be? Is it Konoha? But how could they know I was planning to escape in this direction? No, something's off." The sensor suddenly spoke up. "Orochimaru-sama, I can sense some chakra signatures. There are 4 running towards us and they all seem strong. They are likely elite jounins. One of them has an especially strong chakra signature." Orochimaru's group was surprised. Had Orochimaru been in a good condition, they wouldn't have cared about such a group. However, they were worried right now. Kimimaro asked, "Orochimaru-sama, what do we do?" Orochimaru immediately answered, "There is no gain in fighting right now. On the contrary, there is a lot to lose. Avoid them." Everyone nodded. They were about to leave when the censor said grimly, "Orochimaru-sama, they're already here, and I can sense 36 more ninjas following them, though they aren't that strong." She sensed that Orochimaru's group had stopped moving. Growing suspicious, Darui ordered the group to flicker continuously, catching up with them before they could retreat. Of course, when they landed in front of Orochimaru's group, they were in for a surprise. Darui's eyes widened as he exclaimed, "Orochimaru?" She asked, "What is he doing here?" Samui guessed, "Did he run here while escaping from Konoha's forces?" Yujiro chuckled and taunted, "You don't look good, Orochimaru. Who'd have thought that one of Konoha's legendary Sannin would see such a day? Heh." Yujiro's taunt was on point. Even though Orochimaru had fooled Fujin's army and successfully escaped, it didn't change the fact that it was extremely humiliating. A month ago, this would have been unthinkable for Orochimaru. Unfortunately, he crossed too many lines, forcing Hiruzen to stop showing mercy. Remembering his state, Orochimaru controlled his temper. However, he knew that he couldn't appear weak. He replied teasingly, "I thought I was mistaken earlier, but it looks like I was right. I wonder why so many Kumagakure ninjas are scurrying out of my country. You wouldn't be afraid of the ninja leading Konoha's forces, would you?" The expressions of the Kumo ninjas became dark. Much like Yujiro's words, Orochimaru's words also held a humiliating truth. Before they could reply, Orochimaru continued, "Since we both have issues with Suzuki Fujin, why not collaborate? I know exactly where he is right now. You can reach him if you move immediately. After all, you want justice for hundreds of your missing ninjas, don't you?" Darui and the others frowned. They wondered, does Orochimaru know something about that incident? Or is he just throwing mud on Fujin to infuriate us and force a conflict between Konoha and Kumagakure? While Darui and others were sure that Fujin was involved in some way, they weren't sure to what extent he was involved. More importantly, they weren't sure whether Orochimaru knew something or not. Regardless, they didn't have the forces to confront Fujin and the Konoha army in the land of grass, so they could only focus on the ones in front of them. She asked softly, "What do we do?" Darui sighed and whispered, "There is only one thing we can do." His expression suddenly became serious as he rapidly weaved hand signs and said loudly, "Orochimaru, I'm afraid you will have to stay with us as a guest. Since you know about our missing ninjas, I can't let you go. Storm release, laser circus jutsu." While Kumagakure forces confronted Orochimaru, who had unfortunately run straight into them, large areas in the land of rice were still burning. In one area that wasn't touched by the flames, 2 individuals stood unbothered by the destruction. One of them muttered, "The Konoha ninjas have been scurrying more and more around this area. Can we finally kill them, my man?" His partner replied in an annoyed tone, "There are too many of them. It'll attract a lot of attention, not to mention—" The 2 immediately jumped away as a few stealthy air bullets landed at their previous location and drilled a few holes in the ground. They turned their heads to see where the bullets were fired from. Their eyes landed on a youngster standing on a branch and looking down at them. A smirk appeared on his face as he muttered, "Heh, I didn't think I'd run into Sasori of the Red Sand here. What an honor." Chapter 784, Chaos in the Ninja World 2. "Heh, I didn't think I'd run into Sasori of the Red Sand here. What an honor." Fujin was genuinely happy. He couldn't even hide the glint in his eye. The last time they met, Sasori had given Fujin quite a gift. Fujin had even traded some of it with Hiruzen and got his hands on a very useful rank S jutsu. Even though he still wasn't very comfortable with handling the other puppets, there was no reason to decline another generous gift. He couldn't help but wonder whether Sasori would give him the legendary puppet of the 3rd Kazekage during their second meeting. A chill passed down Deidara's spine as he shivered involuntarily and wondered, "I have never seen such a passionate gaze. Why is he staring at Sasori in such a manner? It's almost as if he found some great treasure." Sasori, despite having changed his body to a puppet, immediately lost his temper. Needless to say, he had already connected the dots when Zetsu reported Fujin's abilities. However, he never imagined that Fujin would look at him in such a brazen manner on their second meeting. There wasn't a hint of doubt in his mind that Fujin wanted to steal more of his puppets. He cursed. "It was you, wasn't it, Suzuki Fujin? You are the one who stole my puppets." The Konoha ninjas who were following Fujin were dumbfounded. None of them ever imagined that their commander would be accused like this by a rogue ninja. Konomi wondered, what in the hell? He stole puppets from Sasori. Is that even possible? No wonder he is so angry. I can feel his bloodlust. To the surprise of the Konoha ninjas, Fujin immediately replied aggressively, "Bullshit! This is the first time I have seen you. Don't try to sully the reputation of Konoha ninjas without any proof." Fujin's words confused the Konoha ninjas. They wondered who was lying. While they would normally believe their commander, they saw no reason for Sasori to make such a ridiculous lie. Even Deidara was confused. He thought, such a passionate response, it almost makes me believe him. However, what was the glint in his eyes earlier? No, Sasori should be the one telling the truth. Still, to steal his puppets. What a lunatic! Unlike the confused fellows, Sasori was even more enraged. Not only had Fujin humiliated him by interfering with his mission, defeating his puppetry and stealing his invaluable puppets, but he also refused to take credit for any of those achievements. For a moment, Sasori wasn't sure what was more humiliating. A dozen puppets suddenly appeared around Sasori, and he said, "It doesn't matter whether you lie or not, I'll refine you into my next puppet." Seeing the puppets, the Konoha ninjas became slightly nervous. Sasori may have gone rogue over a decade ago, but his reputation still remained. No one wanted to deal with his countless, unpredictable, and poisonous traps. Thankfully, Fujin ordered, "Retreat! I'll handle these too. Don't come close to our battlefield." The Konoha ninjas nodded and immediately retreated. While some were worried for Fujin, the ones who saw him fight in the arena were confident in his abilities. Deidara put his hands in his bag and began eating clay with the mouths on his hands while looking at the retreating ninjas. However, before he could make a move, Sasori said, "Let them go. We can't afford any distraction against him." Deidara frowned and asked, "Wouldn't it be better if we forced him to protect his weaker allies?" Sasori answered, "No, he isn't soft like the recent generations of Konoha ninjas. He is as ruthless as their older generation." Sasori moved a few fingers, launching several poisonous needles at Fujin. However, a breeze appeared, blocking them with ease. Soon after, Fujin expelled large amounts of chakra, immediately transforming into winds. Sasori and Deidara retreated while Sasori warned, "Don't underestimate him and be careful of those winds. If you enter its range, you'll die." Deidara was surprised. He didn't expect Sasori to control his anger so easily and have such a high opinion of Suzuki Fujin despite being humiliated seconds ago. While Sasori was undoubtedly angry, he clearly recalled how useless his puppets were against Fujin's technique. It was the first time in his life that he had been defeated so easily. As such, Sasori treated Fujin as his greatest enemy instead of with disdain. The wind domain took form as Fujin moved forward. Several wind blades flew towards Sasori and Deidara as Fujin asked loudly, "You wouldn't run away after accusing me, would you, Sasori?" Lava release, melting apparition jutsu, water release, great waterfall jutsu on the high seas, two supercharged jutsus clashed. The Mizukage faction ninjas breathed a sigh of relief. They were fighting against the rebel forces when Terumi Mei suddenly appeared on the battlefield and unleashed a massive wave of lava at them. They were completely caught off guard. Fortunately, before the lava could reach them, an equally strong water jutsu stopped it. Mei turned her head and said, "Mengetsu, I didn't expect you to be here." Mengetsu chucked. "Yeah, I was on my way to the main battlefield when I had a feeling that something was off. To think you would appear on this battlefield. If you win here before the main battlefield is settled, you could move these forces to flank our main army." A nasty maneuver indeed. Mei sighed and asked softly, "Why do you keep serving the fourth Mizukage, Mengetsu? His reign has caused nothing but pain to Kirigakyo. Join forces with me. Together we could settle the war quickly and end the suffering of our people." Mengetsu grabbed Shibuki and replied, "Not only have you betrayed the village, but you are also trying to convince me to do the same. Why don't you stop this pointless resistance and surrender? It'll bring peace to the country. Besides," a smirk appeared on his face as he asked, "Do you think Lord Fourth is that weak?" Mei's expression became dark. She knew very well how strong Yagura was. No one in Kirigakure had the strength to defeat a perfect Jinchuriki. The rebels had avoided him so far. However, they would eventually have to face him to win the civil war. But that was an issue for later. On this sea, Terumi Mei, the strongest ninja in the rebel camp, and Hazuki Mengetsu, the strongest ninja after the fourth Mizukage in the Mizukage faction, faced off in an epic battle. This is all very convenient. I'll eliminate the two of you at the same time. In an inn, Jiraiya faced off against Uchiha Itachi and Hoshigaki Kisame to protect Naruto and Sasuke. Two of the strongest ninjas in Konoha were confronting a pair of Akatsuki members each at the same time. Shit! We're completely outmatched. If this continues, we'll be wiped out. Even Orochimaru-sama could be captured by Kumagakure. If that happens, Kimimaro analyzed grimly as he coughed blood. Darui was extremely strong just by himself and was supported by two elite jounins. However, it was Yujido who made Orochimaru's subordinates feel helpless. A near-perfect Jinchuriki was too strong for them. Even at his peak, Orochimaru wouldn't take her lightly. To make matters worse, 36 more Kumagakure ninjas had joined in the battle. While they lacked in strength, they took away the numerical advantage of Orochimaru's subordinates and put them at a heavy disadvantage even in this aspect. In just a couple of minutes, 4 of Orochimaru's subordinates had sacrificed their lives. Dance of the Seedling Fern! Kimimaro dug his right arm into the ground and sprouted a bone forest around him. Thousands of blades of bones rose from the ground, piercing several Kumagakure ninjas. Due to her massive form, even the cloak around Yujido was pierced. Kimimaro huffed as he said, "I'll stall them, Orochimaru-sama, you must escape." Orochimaru immediately left with the rest of his subordinates. Had Kimimaro been in good condition, there was some hope of him making it out alive. Unfortunately, his condition had only worsened after Rasa's final blow. Even without this battle, he didn't have much time left to live. Orochimaru could only sigh at how rapidly he kept losing his most reliable subordinates. Kabuto, Guren, and the Sound Four all had died due to his plans of attacking Konoha, and now Kimimaro was about to join them. How did we go from hunting that snake to fighting this monster? My art has no effect on him. The birds just explode whenever they enter those winds. Even the shockwaves of the explosions don't reach him. I suspect that he might repel even the C4 Karura. Deidara sighed helplessly. Chapter 785, Chaos in the Ninja World 3. Deidara was feeling helpless and annoyed at Fujin's wind domain. He couldn't help but recall the events that landed him in this situation. He and Sasori were looking for Orochimaru to eliminate him at Nagato's orders. They successfully found his main base even before Konoha's forces located it. However, they were misled just like Konoha's forces by Orochimaru's little scheme. Since they weren't as good as the Konoha ninjas at tracking, their speed was slower. Before they could find the sacrificial unit, the place was swamped by Konoha ninjas, trapping them in the area too. As they had no reason to kill hundreds of Konoha ninjas and attract unneeded attention, they stayed hidden. Under normal circumstances, Konoha ninjas wouldn't have found them. Unfortunately for them, the army was led by none other than Fujin, who found it peculiar that the Konoha ninjas couldn't spot the two disturbances in space that he was feeling with his space-time sensing technique. In the few minutes they clashed, Sasori ensured that his chakra threads didn't enter the wind domain, allowing him to keep control of his puppets. Unfortunately, it was almost impossible to hit Fujin from 50 meters away. Any surprising traps in his puppets would be just too slow to reach him. Not to mention, the winds would just knock off all of his attacks. Even poisonous gases were contained by the winds. On the contrary, Fujin destroyed the dozen puppets Sasori controlled. That said, it wasn't as if Sasori didn't have any gains. As for Deidara, he went through half of his explosive clay to get a feel of the wind domain. While they gained some intel, they failed to inflict a single scratch on Fujin. However, intelligence was a crucial aspect in ninja battles. While Deidara was still too young and inexperienced, Sasori's analytical mind quickly calculated ways to counter the absurd jutsu. He thought, what a remarkable control over the winds! I have never seen anyone even remotely close to this level of mastery in wind manipulation. At first glance, this technique is completely invincible. However, every technique has weaknesses. His weakness should be Pain's and Kisame's ability to absorb chakra. Unfortunately, neither is here. Luckily, there are still several other shortcomings. Even though the technique is very strong, it severely restricts his movement. He can't move the wind domain along with him at a fast speed. Otherwise, we would already be trapped inside it. In addition, the wind domain doesn't extend into the ground for obvious reasons, so he can't counter underground attacks that easily. However, Zetsu said that he also displayed the ability to fly. He could avoid underground attacks that way, but it would increase his chakra consumption, which is another weakness of this jutsu. Even though it looks like the dome is entirely made of winds, it contains a large amount of his chakra which he uses to control the winds. While my poisons and weapons have no effect on it, Deidara's explosions have consumed a decent amount of that chakra. Unfortunately, Deidara will run out of clay as well as chakra long before Fujin shows any signs of exhaustion. However, we could employ this tactic when we have a significant numerical advantage. Fujin knew Sasori and Deidara were analyzing his technique. It was very much expected, and one of the main reasons why Fujin kept most of his techniques a secret. However, this time he didn't mind it. He thought, interesting. I wonder if he can find any counters. That'll be the way for me to improve this jutsu further and take it as close to perfect as a jutsu can be. Unlike his other techniques, the wind domain was going to be Fujin's core technique. Though he hasn't used it too many times publicly, he absolutely intended to do so whenever he faced strong opponents. It showed his confidence in the technique. Even if all its secrets were leaked, Fujin was confident that no one could break it. Of course, nothing was perfect. Every technique would have some shortcomings, especially a newly created technique like the wind domain. Thankfully, several capable individuals were willing to help him improve the technique. Hence, Fujin was looking forward to seeing how far he could perfect this creation of his. Sasori grabbed a different scroll and opened it, summoning the puppet of the third Kazekage. At the same time, he said, "Deidara, leave him to me. You hunt down those Konoha ninjas who escaped. Blow up as many as you can." Deidara was surprised, but had no reason to decline to do the one thing he enjoyed. His hands began eating more clay as it replied with a grin, "Leave it to me." At the same time, winds became chaotic within the wind domain. Fujin sighed and exclaimed, "The third Kazekage! To think that you were the trigger that started the third great ninja war. I wonder what Sunagaku would think when they learn the truth, hehe." Sasori didn't react to Fujin's provocations, while Deidara created a large clay bird and jumped on its back. Large amounts of iron dust rose around the third Kazekage puppet while Deidara flew towards the Konoha ninjas. Sasori said, "Now let me see how strong Konoha's spectral swordsman is." Fujin paid no attention to his words. Instead, he noticed something else. He thought, not bad. He blocked my sight with that iron dust while secretly sending 2 puppets underground. Tusk, that's troublesome. Fujin didn't show any reaction to this sneaky move and instead replied, "It's a good tactic. Unfortunately for you, Orochimaru gave me some good tips to improve my technique some time ago." The winds inside the domain finally settled and took Fujin's shape. Fujin used a third of the wind domain's chakra to create a wind clone. At the same time, a sixth of the wind domain's chakra manipulated some winds to create a cloak around Fujin's main body. In the blink of an eye, Fujin consumed half of his wind domain. The changes surprised Sasori. Before he could react, strong winds blasted behind Fujin's wind clone as he disappeared from the domain. Deidara's instincts warned him as he turned his head back. His eyes widened as he cursed, "What the fuck is that?" The clay bird quickly flapped its wings, taking Deidara to a higher altitude and barely dodging the wind current heading towards him. To Deidara's surprise, the wind stopped and he saw Fujin's wind clone. The wind clone smiled and said, "We've just met, Deidara. Why are you in such a hurry to leave your new friend behind?" Deidara frowned and cursed, "Who's your friend, bastard?" Fujin's clone replied with a smile, "Me, of course. When the old Anoki heard that you went rogue, he went berserk and sent Roshi and Kitsuchi to bring you back. I was the one who stalled them so that you could enjoy your freedom. Yet not only did you not say thank you, but you also tried to run away after attacking me. Sai, why are you so ungrateful?" The clone's voice became sorrowful towards the end. Deidara's eyes twitched as he was left dumbfounded by the clone's words. For a moment he couldn't even form proper thoughts. That's how absurd Fujin's clone was. Deidara finally wondered, what in the hell? He stopped that geezer from coming after me? But what's his connection? Isn't he from Konoha? Why would that geezer listen to his words? Fujin's wind clone chuckled internally at Deidara's expressions. Being younger than even Fujin, Deidara wasn't as good at hiding his emotions as the older ninjas. Needless to say, the clone was spouting this nonsense just to waste some time. While the wind clone was very strong and could bully weaker ninjas and even force jounins to retreat, Deidara was in a whole different league. Killing him with just the clone that contained around 5% of Fujin's chakra was highly unrealistic. Fujin just wanted to waste Deidara's time, chakra and clay while he dealt with the bigger and the generous threat. While several high-profile battles happened simultaneously around the world, the rebels were wiped out quickly following the deaths of their leaders in the land of grass. Kajero, his students and Tsukero were all dead. Several ninjas tried to run away, but it was a hopeless prospect due to the Hyuga and the Aburame ninjas. Not a single one made it out alive. The only survivors were among the ninjas who had been dispatched earlier to set traps and fake routes for the Konoha ninjas. While Konoha killed several of them, 3 dozen still remained. However, it didn't have anything to do with the Konoha forces. They had already fulfilled their mission requirements. After storing the bodies of the rebel leaders, they quickly retreated. Now that Iwagakure was aware that Fujin was not present in the land of grass, the risk increased several times, and they had no intention to wait and find out what decision Iwagakure would make. Renjiro sent a few squads to Kusagakure to deliver the bodies and report the success, while the remaining army moved towards the land of fire. Ryoichi retreated with the Kusagakure army as well and returned to his village. Chapter 786, that is art. Magnet release. Iron Sand Gathering Assault Jutsu. Sasori controlled the third Kazekage puppet and unleashed enormous amounts of iron sand, transforming them into highly dense shapes and launching them at Fujin. Fujin looked at the weapons and thought, not bad. The dense nature of these blocks means that there isn't much my wind jutsus can do against it. Even though the vacuum jutsus can poke a few holes, it wouldn't be much help. Oh well. Massive palms appeared in the wind domain and grabbed the iron objects, stopping them. Under normal circumstances, Fujin wouldn't have any issue sending such objects back at the enemy, but magnet release meant that the third Kazekage puppet had a greater influence on the iron objects than Fujin's wind domain. Sasori looked at the ghost palms and analyzed. So, he can also do this. No matter, I can already see a weakness in his technique. His fingers moved slightly. The large iron objects disintegrated into small particles once again. The sudden loss in density caused the ghost palms to tighten into fists, while almost all the iron sand escaped into the wind domain. They began moving along the winds while inching dangerously closer to Fujin. Fujin immediately controlled the winds to throw the smaller iron particles out of his domain. They were much easier to handle than the larger particles. However, he faced another issue. There were too many iron particles. His initial move couldn't get rid of them all, and the third Kazekage puppet ignored the iron that was blown away and focused entirely on what remained behind. As a result, its control increased considerably, and Fujin couldn't expel it from the wind domain as easily. A frown appeared on Fujin's face as he realized, I didn't think magnet release would pose such a challenge to my wind domain. Although I have thrown out most of the iron sand, he can still exert control over them. Not to mention, it's the few remaining that pose a challenge. If I make a mistake, they could even pierce through my wind cloak. Fujin knew that defense wasn't particularly a strong point of wind domain. After all, it was made of air. What defense could it provide? What made it such a threat was that it could redirect almost all jutsus, and living beings made of flesh and blood wouldn't dare to step into the domain. However, against mere iron particles, that threat was useless. Redirecting it wasn't very useful either, as the third Kazekage puppet could redirect it once more. As several iron particles moved at high speeds through his domain, Fujin suddenly flickered and began floating around 25 meters above the ground. The sudden move wasn't to dodge any iron particles controlled by the third Kazekage puppet. Instead, it was to dodge the sneak attack coming from underground by Sasori's other puppets. Sasori observed, so he discovered the sneak attack. No matter, I doubt his mobility in the air is as good as his mobility on the ground. The chakra he needs to maintain his technique should be much higher than what I need to control the iron sand. Now, let me see how long he can endure the pressure. The poisonous needles launched by the puppets stopped moving in the wind domain due to the strong winds. However, the third Kazekage puppet took control of them as well and attacked Fujin with it, while the other puppets escaped underground once again. Sasori was actively limiting Fujin's movements while forcing him to pay attention to several threats at the same time. Fujin looked at the needles while thinking, as fun as this is, it's time to stop being on the defensive. My clone won't be able to stall Deidara forever. The winds in the wind domain became chaotic once again and knocked all of the iron controlled by the third Kazekage puppet off course. At the same time, Fujin directed his wind domain towards the ground. While digging into the ground would waste a lot of chakra and Fujin would normally use vacuum bullets to create underground routes for his winds, he had an even better option. Small holes had been opened up in the ground by the poisonous needles that were shot from underground. They connected to the larger spaces that were created by the puppets themselves. Winds rapidly moved into them and caught up with the puppets. Before Sasori could realize it, his chakra threads that controlled those puppets were sliced by the wind blades that formed underground. Sasori suddenly realized, incredible, he used the paths created by the needles and puppets to extend his technique underground. Wait, that means… Shit! Sasori immediately flickered, taking the third Kazekage puppet with him as well. Moments later, winds rushed out of the very path the puppets had taken underground. Even though Sasori had covered the ground to not alert Fujin, it was ripped open by wind blades. Its location wasn't too far from Sasori and the third Kazekage previous position. Had Sasori not moved, the chakra threads he used to control the third Kazekage puppet would have been severed. Fujin sighed and thought, "A pity. I almost had it." Sasori cursed internally. "I didn't think he could use the underground attacks as a way to counterattack. It makes this a much more risky option than I initially thought. I'll need to cover up underground tracks after I make my move. However, that will mean I'll have to sacrifice my puppets to make just a single attack." Huh! The wind domain suddenly began heating up. Sasori was still moving away from the winds that were extending towards him when he turned his gaze back to Fujin. At the center of the wind domain, several flaming orbs were floating around Fujin, and even more were forming as fire merged into the winds of the wind domain. Sasori wondered in surprise. "Is that?" Fujin thought, "Oh well, I haven't had time to practice this much, and this still can't be considered a Kekkei Genkai, but the damage wouldn't be any lesser." The flaming orbs began fusing into one large orb in Fujin's hands. Once every one of them was absorbed, strong winds blasted behind Fujin. He left the wind domain and appeared right above Sasori and the third Kazekage puppet. "Scorch release, evaporation blast jutsu, stop fucking talking, I'll blow your damn mouth," a frustrated Deidara shouted in rage. While Sasori and Fujin engaged in an intense battle, Deidara was thoroughly annoyed by the clone's bullshit. Even experienced and scheming ninjas were left annoyed by Fujin's words. Poor Deidara simply didn't stand a chance. Worse, he couldn't even do anything as none of his explosive tools reached the wind clone. If looks could kill, well, even if they could kill, Fujin wouldn't mind since Deidara was looking murderously at his wind clone. Fujin wouldn't even receive any memories of their conversation. To his disbelief, a pained look appeared on the wind clone's face. It was as if he received the greatest betrayal in history. The pain was obvious in his voice as he muttered, "Deidara, how could you say that? Do you know how much risk I had to take to deliver this news to you, and you react like this? I'm hurt." For a moment, even Deidara felt the wind clone's sincerity. He wondered, could it be real? But why would I care? What does that have to do with me? Fujin's wind clone continued, "The news is absolutely true. When you left, Kuretsuchi declared she would stay single for the rest of her life. Everyone in Iwagakure is aware of this declaration. That is why the third Tsuchikage was so angry. If I hadn't stopped him, he would have come out himself to hunt you down. I can't even imagine what magic you performed to snatch the granddaughter of that old man." Deidara annoyingly cursed. "What magic could I even perform? I only met her a handful of times." The clone's eyes widened as surprise appeared on his face. He muttered, "Damn, how did you do that in just a handful of meetings? I heard every boy in Iwagakure is mad. Most are training their hearts out to hunt you down and gain Kuretsuchi's favor." Once again, Deidara was left completely speechless. He wanted to curse, but couldn't even decide how to do so considering that Fujin was praising him. Before he opened his mouth, Fujin's clone continued, "That said, I'm surprised that this is the first time you heard. From what I heard, the news is spreading rapidly throughout the land of Earth. Does Akatsuki keep you on a leash or something?" Deidara didn't care about the news. Some doubts about the Akatsuki appeared in his mind. After all, he should have heard about it. He wondered, could it be that Akatsuki is keeping me in the dark to prevent me from returning to the village? Even though I don't want to return, manipulating me in this way is. He decided to think about it later and replied, "I don't care about that shitty village or Kuretsuchi." His hands chewed more clay as he continued, "I just want to perfect my art." "Art is?" Fujin's clone interrupted him as he said with disgust, "You call those lousy explosions art?" Once again, Deidara was annoyed. However, before he could retort, Fujin's clone pointed in a direction and said, "Look there, that is art. Chapter 787, Losses Pile On. You call those lousy explosions as art? Look there, that is art." Deidara looked in the direction Fujin's wind clone was pointing in. Deidara squinted and raised an arm to shield his eyes as the intense flare burst in that direction, momentarily forcing him to look away. Moments later, a searing wave of heat washed over him, prickling his skin and making the air around him feel heavy and suffocating. Deidara tried to look in that direction again as he wondered, what was that explosion? And why did it release such intense heat waves? Though my explosions are bigger and more destructive, they never release such heat. Deidara's eyes gleamed with admiration as he took in the fiery spectacle before him. The heatwave set fire to the area that was previously untouched by the flames. It rapidly expanded towards the burning fields and intensified the flames even further while triggering a few more explosions. While others would find the scene distasteful or dangerous, Deidara was mesmerized by the swirling heat and vapor. He subconsciously muttered, "Now that is true art." "Isn't it? You should go take a closer look." Fujin's clone casually said. Deidara subconsciously nodded when he suddenly realized, wait, what did he mean? His eyes widened as an intense wind current formed behind him and hit him and the clay bird he was standing on. Both were dragged along by the wind current. The clay bird couldn't endure such pressure and exploded, hurling Deidara towards the ground even faster. As he tried to stabilize himself, he wondered, "What the hell? Why didn't I sense that attack?" The answer was rather simple. The clone's attack simply lacked the intent to kill or even hurt Deidara. Though Deidara was very young, he was still someone who the Akatsuki considered worthy enough to recruit to their ranks. If the clone had tried to sneak attack with wind blades or air bullets, Deidara would have instinctively felt it and dodged despite being so close and distracted. Fujin's clone wouldn't look down on Deidara to that extent. What he did was quite similar to how Naruto pushed Shikamaru into the arena, except that it was a wind current instead of a simple push. Without his instincts warning him, Deidara simply failed to react quickly enough. On the ground, Sasori hid behind an iron dome to protect himself from the scorching heat. He thought, "That was close. I didn't think he'd leave that dome or know Pakura's Kekkei Genkai. Hiroku's puppet stood no chance against that attack. In fact, my core could have been hurt as well due to the invasive nature of the scorch release." Sasori noticed that the temperature inside the iron dome was heating up. However, he didn't find it too strange. Even though the iron particles stuck together closely, they couldn't block the heat completely. Once the heat from the jutsu dispersed, the pressure on the dome would ease too. Yet, Sasori suddenly felt uneasy. He wondered, did I miss something? He quickly analyzed his situation when he suddenly realized a terrifying possibility. The iron dome moved, creating a path behind him from where Sasori immediately escaped, along with the third Keisuke puppet. His eyes immediately noticed the terrifying possibility he saw was not just a possibility, but a reality. The winds that formed the wind domain were moving. Had Sasori stayed inside the iron dome for a couple of seconds more, he'd be trapped inside Fujin's wind domain. While he wasn't sure whether Fujin could kill him, he did not doubt that Fujin would steal most of his puppets irrespective of the result of their battle. That said, his new position wasn't safe either. He and the puppet were bombarded with air bullets and wind blades. Luckily, he could still control the iron sand to block or divert the deadly attacks. Sasori blocked and dodged all of Fujin's attacks. Just when he finally caught a breather, Deidara crashed next to him. He quickly got on his feet and cursed, "That bastard! I'll get him next time!" Both Fujin and Sasori were left speechless by his little outrage. Sasori looked at his partner in disbelief as he wondered, is he cursing his wind clone instead of the one who sent it after him? How does he plan on finding his wind clone the next time? Will he ask Fujin to create one for him? Sasori stopped thinking about his partner's idiosyncrasies when Fujin suddenly laughed loudly and said, "Great that you are finally here, Deidara! Help me kill him!" Fujin's words caught both the Akatsuki members off guard. Sasori raised his guard against both Fujin and Deidara while Deidara wondered, "When did I say I'll betray Akatsuki?" Before either of them could figure out what was happening, dense vacuum cores started forming at Fujin's fingertips. He was about to attack when he suddenly felt something off and raised his guard. "What sort of perverted Kekkei Genkai is this? This freak killed 16 of our comrades by himself." A disgruntled Kumigakure Chunin spoke as he took his anger out on Kimimara's dead body. After Orochimaru left, Kimimaro stopped holding back and went all out with no regard for his own life. While the experienced ninjas recognized that he was a survivor of the Kaguya clan, none of them imagined Kimimaro to be so fearsome. His sudden outburst had caught the Kumigakure ninjas off guard, and 16 ninjas died before Darui and Yujido could contain him. In fact, Darui, Yujido, C, and Samui had scars on their bodies as well. Even though he was finally killed, none of them was pleased. Darui sighed and muttered, "It's almost as if we're cursed. Ever since that expedition boss started, our ninjas continue to fall." He sighed again and said sorrowfully while looking at the bodies of his dead comrades, "Sorry, I wasn't strong enough to protect you." C added, "Sacrifices on the battlefield are inevitable. However, we lost so many ninjas to this sick Kaguya shinobi. If we had captured or killed Orochimaru, it would have been an acceptable sacrifice. Unfortunately, Kumo once again had little to show for their loss. This time, Darui's group could at least take solace in the fact that they at least got their hands on the dead body of Kaguya ninja, unlike their previous encounters where they truly returned empty-handed. In the Land of Fire, Itachi and Kisame ran away from Jiraiya just like in the original story. Unlike them, an intense battle raged in the Land of Water. While Mei and Mengetsu locked horns with each other, thousands of other Kiri ninjas battled on various battlefields as well. With neither side showing any signs of backing off, the civil war reached a crucial stage. Whoever wins would get a significant upper hand in the war. In the land of rice, Fujin suddenly launched the vacuum Gatling gun towards Sasori and Deidara. However, there was one big difference between the way he used it this time as compared to the previous times. Instead of just targeting Sasori, Deidara, and their escape routes, the jutsu was wayward. As a result, the vacuum bullets covered a much larger area, but there were several gaps between them as well. While Fujin became more famous in Konoha quite recently, his fame had spread outside Konoha long ago. While every major village and almost every minor village studied him closely, there was one organization that focused the highest on him. That was none other than Akatsuki. While they didn't pay much attention to Team Renjiro's encounter with Kakuzu and Kaminari, or to the rumors of the spectral swordsman, Fujin killed one of their members during his second encounter with them. Juzo's death made them take Fujin very seriously, and they conducted a thorough investigation of him. Yet, Fujin's abilities surprised them once again when he clashed with Kakuzu for the second time, this time destroying one of his hearts and putting Kakuzu in a difficult spot several times. He also managed to get away successfully from Kakuzu, Konan, and Itachi. So the Akatsuki members were very well aware of the abilities that Fujin had previously displayed. Therefore, Sasori couldn't help but be surprised. Didn't Kakuzu say that he could only fire one bullet at a time from each finger and fire 5 rounds in quick succession? The old information has become too unreliable now. Luckily, he has lost his aim while trying to increase their numbers. Deidara also observed, so this is the famous technique of the spectral swordsman. Tusk, it is extremely sharp. However, why is he attacking me when he says that he wants to work together with me? Weird, though the bullets look like they're heading towards me, none of them will hit me. Could this be his way of saying he wants to cooperate with me? However, why is he so confident that I'll cooperate with him? The words and actions of Fujin and his clone left Deidara completely confused. Before his mind could come up with any strange theory, he felt something behind him. While dodging Fujin's attack, they glanced back and saw a sight neither had seen in their lives. Deidara questioned in shock, "What's that?" Chapter 788, Confusion. "What's that?" Deidara exclaimed as he saw something he had never seen. Even Sasori was surprised. As for Fujin, the scene was oddly familiar even though it was his first time seeing it in this lifetime. Around a meter behind Sasori and Deidara, a crack opened up in space. A man wearing an orange mask began appearing. It was none other than Uchiha Abaido, the successor of Uchiha Madara and the one who impersonated him following Madara's death. Ever since the day he awakened his Mangekyou Sharingan, Abaido enjoyed complete invulnerability. His opponents failed even to touch him, let alone harm him. There was just one person who managed to land an attack on him. Unfortunately for Abaido, today was the day when he'd meet the second person. Even before Abaido completely exited his Kamui dimension, dozens of vacuum bullets were mere meters away from him. Fujin observed, "Oh, so that's how it feels when someone interferes with the space-time field. Heh, what a good opportunity." Though surprise could be seen on Fujin's face as well, his true emotions were hidden deep within. Even though none of it leaked out, he was filled with bloodlust at that particular moment. As annoying as Abaido's ability was, it had one weakness, a weakness Fujin fully intended to exploit. Hence, the one who was most surprised in reality was none other than Abaido. He cursed, "Shit, why did he fire vacuum bullets everywhere?" Since he was moving between dimensions, he couldn't make his body intangible. A vacuum bullet passed right through the spot where his head was about to appear. However, it passed harmlessly before Abaido exited the Kamui dimension. Fujin frowned and thought, so, he can slow down the speed at which he is leaving the Kamui dimension. Sai, I can't kill him that easily, can I? Even though one of the biggest threats passed harmlessly, the danger wasn't over for Abaido. He immediately leaned his head to the left as 2 vacuum bullets grazed past his right cheek and head. 2 deep cracks appeared on his mask as deep cuts appeared below and above his ear. However, he had no time to pay attention to the injuries as he twisted his body while he was materializing into the ninja world. A vacuum bullet grazed his right rib, a couple left cuts on his left arm, and another couple of bullets slashed past his legs. However, Fujin wasn't pleased. None of the injuries were fatal in any way. Sasori and Deidara watched as 5 more vacuum bullets were about to hit him. One was aimed straight at his forehead, one at his right lung, one at his abdomen, and the last 2 at his thighs. Since Abaido had barely dodged the previous round, he wasn't in a position to dodge the next round. The 2 members of Akatsuki watched one of the creators of Akatsuki being pierced in 5 spots. Deidara wondered, what the hell? He just appeared out of thin air and died before even speaking. Fujin sighed internally. A shame. His timing was impeccable. If he had been a fraction of a second late or early, I might have killed him. Anyway, I wonder how much he values these 2. This could be fun. I'm glad he isn't wearing Akatsuki's cloak, hee. To Deidara and Sasori's surprise, no new wounds opened up on Abido's body. Instead, he ignored his injuries and extended his palms towards Deidara and Sasori. Since they were already retreating backwards, they had very little time to react. In front of them was Fujin, who was firing vacuum bullets at a crazy rate, and a meter behind them was a new opponent with peculiar abilities. Deidara, be careful, he seems dangerous. Deidara was surprised as Fujin suddenly shouted. His shout confused all three Akatsuki members. Deidara confusedly thought, seriously, what the hell is up with this guy? Why is he looking out for me? Deidara took a step away from the Abido's extending arm, even at the risk of moving closer to Fujin. Sasori looked at Deidara suspiciously and wondered, did Deidara betray us? However, how could he betray us so quickly? Even though Sasori was suspicious of Deidara, he did the same. After all, he had no reason to trust Abido. At the same time, Abido was also surprised. While he didn't find their actions odd, Fujin's words made him suspicious too. He wondered, did Deidara have a connection with Fujin? Why didn't Zetsu report that when we recruited him? Before he could get any answer, several wind blades appeared around him and cut through him. Even though no new wound appeared, several wind jutsus pierced through his body. His unresponsiveness left Deidara and Sasori in shock. Deidara exclaimed, he can phase through attacks. Sasori agreed. It seems like he can make his body intangible at will. However, there seem to be some weaknesses. Sasori looked at Abido's injuries as he spoke. Before Abido could say anything, Fujin added, that's what it looks like. What did you two do to make such a fierce fellow sneak attack you? If not for my attack, you two might have been dead. Neither Deidara nor Sasori said anything. Needless to say, they wouldn't acknowledge Fujin saving them. Besides, killing them wasn't so easy. Regardless, both recognized that Fujin's attack had helped them. While Sasori didn't think much of it, Deidara was forced to think about it due to his earlier interactions with Fujin and his clone. The wind attacks finally stopped as both Sasori and Deidara created sufficient distance from Abido. Needless to say, the two of them were apart too because Sasori suspected Deidara's loyalty. Abido finally spoke. Don't panic, he is too strong for you. Pain sent me here to rescue the two of you. Sasori and Deidara were surprised once again. While they harbored some suspicion, Abido mentioning Pain's name alleviated some of them. However, before any trust could be established, Fujin scoffed. Bullshit! You couldn't come up with any better lies. Even a newborn baby is aware that all Akatsuki members wear a black cloak with red clouds and a special ring. We may be on opposite sides, but do you think I'll stand by and let you make a fool of an old hero like Sasori and an upcoming youngster like Deidara? All three Akatsuki members were left speechless. Sasori wondered, old hero, however he isn't wrong. Pain wouldn't send an unknown fellow to rescue us. Besides, we weren't in danger of dying. Even though the battle was dangerous, it could have gone either way, and we could have retreated. Deidara also wondered, a newborn baby knows, is Akatsuki that famous? I wasn't aware. Besides, who does he think he is to rescue me? So far in their battle, Fujin hadn't gone all out. Actually, none of the three had gone all out. The battle was still in its early phases and they were merely testing each other. Hence, even though they were at a disadvantage, they never realized the true danger they were in. While Fujin never envisioned such a scenario, he had his reasons for not going all out right at the start. For starters, Sasori and Deidara weren't weaklings. Fujin wasn't aware of how strong Deidara truly was. If he could self-destruct like he eventually did against Sasuke, then Fujin wanted to make sure Deidara was completely exhausted before he chose to do so. After all, hundreds of Konoha ninjas were still in the vicinity. As for Sasori, he had a lot of puppets that Fujin wanted to borrow, especially the third Kazekage puppet. So he had to take it easy and ensure that he could kill Sasori in one clean strike. In addition, he was also wary of any Akatsuki reinforcements. While he never imagined that he would draw out Abido, he wouldn't have been surprised if another duo appeared to help the two of them. Fujin wanted to keep his cards hidden for such a scenario. With Abido appearing right when Fujin put Sasori and Deidara in a tight spot, his concerns were proven true. As a result of the weird sequence of events and Fujin's carefulness, Abido was left in a weird situation. He had appeared to rescue two Akatsuki members, but neither trusted him. On the contrary, they seemed more willing to trust Fujin rather than him. Abido's eyes twitched as he thought, I didn't think the situation would be so weird. I would have worn the cloak otherwise. He was about to think what to say when Fujin suddenly shouted, Sasori, Deidara, let's set aside our differences for now. We'll kill this scammer first and settle our battle later. Chapter 789, A Shameless Battle Maniac. What's the status? Is Commander all right? Konomi asked a Hyuga Jounin. The Hyuga Jounin frowned and answered, "A third person appeared out of thin air. However, my view got blocked. It looks like they have applied some seals in the area." Konomi frowned and wondered, "Should we interfere? However, the opponent is too strong. I'm afraid we'll just get in Commander's way." "Sasori, Deidara, let's set aside our differences for now. We'll kill this scammer first and settle our battle later." The sudden proposal left Abido dumbfounded. He couldn't help but wonder, does he plan to make my underlings attack me? Exactly what did I step into? Needless to say, Abido wasn't afraid. While he found Fujin intriguing, he didn't see either of the 3 rank S ninjas as a challenge. It was just that the situation was completely out of control. He could see that both Sasori and Deidara were thoughtfully considering his offer. Of course, there wasn't enough trust between them for them to actually accept Fujin's proposal. While Deidara thought about it seriously, Sasori didn't even entertain it. He thought, "There is no doubt that he will stab us in the back if we team up. Once we enter that wind dome, it's game over for us," as expected of a schemer from Konoha. His clone must have fed similar bullshit to Deidara. That kid doesn't know how devious Konoha ninjas are. They may have a reputation for being soft, but only brainwashed fools believe that. Even now, he's actively moving the winds to himself. Fujin looked at Deidara's and Sasori's reactions and sighed internally. A shame, though useless, seeing them fight Abido would have been a sight to watch. Oh well, it would have been pointless anyway. To think that as many as 4 Akatsuki members, including 2 founding members, would show up in the middle of nowhere. What an interesting day. The battlefield was disturbed yet again as a plant-like being appeared out of the ground. Deidara and Sasori finally saw a familiar face. Black Zetsu asked, "What's the matter? Why are these 2 confronting you?" Abido didn't know how to explain the situation. Thankfully, Deidara asked, "Do you know him, Zetsu?" White Zetsu answered, "He is a member of Akatsuki too. This mission is a failure. Orochimaru was spotted running towards the Land of Frost. Unfortunately, I couldn't keep track of him." Deidara and Sasori were surprised. They thought so he wasn't lying. Instead, Fujin was the one sowing discord. However, did he know that or was he genuine? Even Abido had the same question. However, he knew that he wouldn't get an answer. He glanced at Fujin, who quickly closed his eyes and muttered, "The Sharingan, huh? So there was another Uchiha among the ranks of Akatsuki. Interesting." To the surprise of the 4 Akatsuki members, seals appeared on Fujin's eyelids as he continued. "That absurd space-time ninjutsu surpasses both the 2nd and the 4th. For someone to surpass them, I suppose your eyes aren't just ordinary Sharingans. No, they must be the fabled Mangekyou Sharingan. Sai, that is scary. Not to mention, that plant-like being's underground speed and stealth is remarkable too. I almost didn't sense him." Heh. Deidara's eyes twitched as he wondered. What the hell is he talking about? Doesn't he see that he is at a heavy disadvantage? Why is he talking nonsense instead of retreating? Abido also observed Fujin curiously. Impressive. He sealed his eyes right when he observed my Sharingan eye. I didn't even have time to cast a genjutsu. He also did well to analyze my abilities. So this is Konoha's latest genius. Should I let him grow? Or should I take this opportunity to eliminate him? Fujin's wind domain had successfully attracted Abido's attention. It countered his ability perfectly as well. Since Fujin could spontaneously create wind blades inside the domain, Abido couldn't risk deactivating his intangibility when he was inside it. In a way, he shared the same weakness as Sasori. So Abido was of the thought of eliminating Fujin before he became as big of a threat as Minato. Before Abido could make a decision, Fujin laughed and said, "The Akatsuki organization. I wonder what your goal is in gathering such powerful ninjas. Regardless, I can't let the 4 of you leave just yet. Konoha needs some answers, so I'm afraid you'll have to stay as my guests." As Fujin spoke, the Akatsuki members became serious. Everyone could feel Fujin building up a massive amount of chakra. None of them missed the movements of the winds either. They could see that Fujin was talking merely to buy some time. A smirk appeared on Deidara's face while Sasori sighed, "Youngsters, they're all suicidal." Fujin's chakra suddenly spiked. His body expelled chakra rapidly, strengthening and expanding the wind domain at a horrendous rate. At the same time, 2 wind dragons appeared from what remained of the previous wind domain and dived towards Sasori and Deidara. In addition, dozens of wind blades, air bullets, and vacuum bullets were launched as well at the same time. Sasori's fingers moved, and the 3rd Kazekage puppet controlled iron sand once again. He was about to use it to attack the wind dragon when the wind dragon was suddenly set ablaze and transformed into a scorched dragon in the blink of an eye. Sasori was once again forced to retreat. Deidara tossed a small clay bird at the mouth of the wind dragon. The explosion shattered the wind dragon, but Deidara was forced to retreat, as well as dozens of wind blades and air bullets were launched at him from the wind dragon before it dispersed completely. Abaido made himself intangible once again, while Zetsu hid underground as their position was bombarded by the remaining wind jutsu. Zetsu came out once the bombardment was over and inquired, "His technique is troublesome for your ability. What do you plan on doing?" Abaido replied, "It is a strong technique. However, he's overreaching hims." Abaido's eyes suddenly widened and he glanced behind him. At the same time, Zetsu escaped underground again as their position was bombarded once again, this time from behind them. Needless to say, it was the same wind clone that had bullshitted Deidara. Abaido looked at the wind clone and thought, "A wind clone! Huh!" Abaido expected the clone to double-team with Fujin. However, the clone smirked and exploded. However, instead of shockwaves, winds were unleashed in every direction. With his Sharingan, Abaido easily noticed Fujin's chakra in those winds. The winds, instead of extending towards Abaido and the rest, started expanding sideways and towards the sky. Abaido's eyes widened as he realized, could it be? He immediately turned his gaze towards Fujin, who was continuously pumping out chakra. Just like the wind clone's domain, Fujin's wind domain was also expanding outwards and towards the skies. Abaido immediately realized that Fujin was building a massive wind domain, one that would trap the three of them. While he wasn't afraid of it, he wouldn't be able to save Sasori and Deidara once they were trapped inside. Even Sasori and Deidara noticed it as they dodged Fujin's assault. Abaido said aloud, "We don't have much time, come with me." He quickly moved forward, but his path was bombarded with vacuum bullets and vacuum blades. Fujin chuckled and taunted, "You couldn't use your ability when you came here. I wonder whether you can use it while you leave." A wide grin appeared on his face as he laughed. "If you can't, then this battle will be decided by whether I run out of chakra first or you are unable to maintain that form. Ha 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 ha! This is even more exciting than fighting Orochimaru." Abaido and the rest had dark expressions when they heard Fujin's laughter. All had the same thought running through their minds. Unseal your eyes if you want excitement. Unfortunately, Fujin's relentless assault left them with no time to retort. They knew it would only take a few seconds for Fujin's wind domain to encircle the entire battlefield. It wouldn't take too long after that for the winds controlled by Fujin to flood the entire area. When that happened, the only escape route Sasori and Deidara would have was underground. However, Sasori wasn't too confident in that escape route after what happened earlier. Sasori counterattacked with iron dust while he and Deidara desperately dodged all attacks. Unlike Abaido, they couldn't turn intangible. They could only be thankful that they weren't under the intense assault that Abaido was. Especially Deidara, who seemed to have it much easier. Abaido couldn't help but wonder, why is he taking it easy on Deidara? Is there really something going on, or is he just sowing seeds of discord? When Abaido reached Sasori, the third Kazekage puppet unleashed all the iron dust it had to create several protective layers to stop Fujin's relentless assault temporarily. Abaido placed his right hand on the Haruko puppet, extended his left hand to Deidara and said, "Quickly hold me." At that moment, Deidara's hands were in his bag, eating clay. Before he could move his hands, Fujin's laughter roared once again as he shouted, "Now, Deidara!" Chapter 790, Betrayal. "Now, Deidara!" Fujin's laughter roared as he called his new friend to make a move. Abaido, whose hand was moving towards Deidara, faltered. His eye observed Deidara's hands, which were still eating clay. While Abaido didn't consider anyone present there a threat, he didn't dare underestimate anyone. Deidara may be young, but his reputation for blowing things up was well known. Additionally, Abaido was also informed that he had a jutsu to blow his entire body up. If Deidara were to suddenly explode while he transferred the two to his Kamui dimension, even Abaido would suffer a great loss. Depending on how subtle Deidara could be, there was even a chance that Abaido could die. With Fujin and Deidara acting weirdly, Abaido grew increasingly suspicious. Even Sasori looked at his young partner with suspicion. He kept the iron sand ready to block any explosives Deidara might throw at them. With Fujin's shout, Sasori mentally prepared himself for a strong explosion. While such thoughts ran through the minds of Sasori and Abaido, Deidara was thoroughly confused. He wondered, now what? What am I supposed to do? And why does this bastard think I'll act at his will? Fuck, not this again. Deidara ignored Fujin's call and looked at Abaido, who had called him earlier. However, all he saw was red. The sight immediately brought memories of his humiliating loss against Itachi. Just like that day, Deidara was put under a genjutsu. Abaido decided, whatever it is, I'll investigate later. Time to leave. What the? A wind pillar hit Deidara's back, surprising Abaido and Sasori. However, it wasn't an ordinary wind pillar. It was an inferior version of Ryu's wind breath. The wind pillar consisted of countless small wind blades. Due to being under Abaido's genjutsu, Deidara couldn't react to the danger behind him. The pillar passed through Deidara's body as if it were nothing but thin air, leaving a massive hole in his abdomen and chest. Deidara, one of the prominent members of the Akatsuki, who would have defeated and captured the fifth Kazekage and nearly killed Sasuke, a reincarnation of Indra, fell in a nameless field in the land of rice. Ironically, the main reason for his death was none other than Uchiha Abaido, who cast a genjutsu on him in his final moments. Though Akatsuki had its fair share of betrayals, be it Kakuzu backstabbing his partners or Orochimaru attacking Itachi, this would be the first instance where a founding member betrayed an Akatsuki member. Abaido and Sasori immediately retreated as the wind pillar continued towards them. Both had the same thought: did we misjudge Deidara, or did Fujin kill him to stop us from getting information? With Deidara dead, it wasn't something they could figure out easily. Both looked at Fujin in a new light. If it was the second case, the two admired Fujin's decisiveness in eliminating a rank S ally. If it was the former, they had to admire and be wary of Fujin's scheming mind. Through just a few words and actions, Fujin successfully planted the doubts of Deidara's loyalty in their minds. Of course, what was also impressive was the speed at which Fujin attacked. Neither of them noticed the attack until it was too late for Deidara. Some distance away, both the Zetsu were shocked as well. White Zetsu muttered, "To think that Fujin could kill Deidara in his presence. We have underestimated him. His threat is extremely high. This is the second time an Akatsuki member fell to him. Only Kakuzu has killed more." Black Zetsu agreed. "More than his techniques, it's his words that are dangerous." Kisame underplayed their significance. Fujin sensed Deidara's falling body and thought, "The future has already changed too much." With Hiruzen surviving Orochimaru's attack, the former cages being sealed inside the god of death, Kakashi gaining strength rapidly, and every hidden village being far more cautious, there is no way the events involving Akatsuki would stay the same. At the very least, Yujido, Roshi, and B won't be captured that easily. Since that is the case, it's time to eliminate these troublesome people. The fewer the variables, the more accurately I'll be able to calculate and make plans. With Kabuto dead, one of the two major forces is already gone. If Sasuke's path changes and he doesn't kill Orochimaru, I'll hunt him down to ensure he doesn't replace Kabuto. That just leaves Akatsuki and the White Zetsu army. Be it through my hands or others, I have to weaken both forces, preferably eliminate both. Of course, the best-case scenario would be if I can kill Abaido here. The only question is, can I? Even though his eyes were sealed, Fujin focused on the spatial disturbances and the chakra signatures of the remaining Akatsuki members. With no attack nearby following Deidara's death and the wind domain some distance away, Abaido decided, "I'll transfer Sasori first." He activated his ability and began transferring Sasori into the Kamui dimension. He wasn't even halfway done when he suddenly felt something and looked at the place where the wind pillar that killed Deidara had landed. To his shock, a wind blade appeared from the residue chakra in that place and flew straight at him. Due to the short distance, Abaido didn't have much time. He looked at the wind blade and thought, so it isn't just from that domain, but he can also use his residual chakra to create new jutsus. However, there are limitations. This attack is far weaker and slower than the jutsu that killed Deidara. Without the support from that technique, he can only use this trick to launch a sneak attack. The blade was inches away from his throat when he completed transferring Sasori and became intangible. A chuckle was heard as Fujin said, "Hee, I could sense your fear. My analysis was perfect. Now then, will you risk escaping too, or do you want to avenge the death of your comrade? Then again, his death was your fault, ha ha ha." Having been fooled once, Abaido ignored Fujin's words just like Orochimaru did previously. In a deep voice, Abaido said, "To be able to use words as weapons at such an age. I shall remember you, Suzuki Fujin." Abaido understood that Fujin's laughter, amusement, and excitement were all fake. Not a single one represented his true emotions. They were mere acts to gain an advantage in the battle, be it by agitating his enemies or buying time for his wind domain to spread throughout the area. While Abaido harbored some thoughts of eliminating Fujin, the sneak attack with the wind blade made him realize how difficult it'd be to fight Fujin inside the wind domain. While he wasn't afraid, he didn't see much reason to overexpose himself at this time. His right eye activated once again as he started entering the Kamui dimension himself. Sensing what was happening, Fujin's cheeks puffed as he prepared a vacuum bullet. Abaido said, "Unfortunately, you no longer have any residue chakra around me. Your wind domain will require a few seconds to reach this area as well. None of your jutsus can reach me in time." Abaido's eyes suddenly widened. The vacuum bullet Fujin fired, even though it looked like an ordinary vacuum bullet, flew at over 10 times the speed of Fujin's previous vacuum bullets. As the vacuum bullet reached right in front of his right eye before he could completely transfer himself to the Kamui dimension, a question rose in Abido's mind. Why is this vacuum bullet so much faster? At the same time, Fujin thought, even though it looks just like a normal vacuum bullet, its core has been greatly modified by me. Under normal conditions, its speed is twice that of my normal vacuum bullets. However, that's where the fun part comes in. A normal vacuum jutsu merely consists of winds flowing through a vacuum core. However, the way I created the core leaves me space to add another component to the jutsu. Though it is very small, it is extremely significant. This component is fire. The fire provides the explosive speed initially, quite similar to the boosters on missiles or rockets. The winds then sustain this explosive speed for a couple of seconds. This was a lucky inspiration I had while I was working on Scorch Release. Unfortunately, the implementation is quite difficult. I completed it just a couple of days ago while others were cleaning up the bases. Modifying the remaining vacuum cores will take months even with shadow clones. In addition, it is riskier than the normal wind vacuum technique due to the fire's presence. I have to pay careful attention to the jutsu to ensure that it won't harm me. So, it's unlikely that I can spam this technique. Regardless, it is still an excellent technique to catch troublesome enemies off guard. Now then, is your Kamui still faster than my attack, Abido? Fujin received his answer immediately. Even though Abido's body disappeared and entered the Kamui dimension, it wasn't before a hole was left in his head, starting from his right eye and opening up at the back of his head. Chapter 791, Human Puppet Abido. What place is this? Is this even the real world? Sasori looked around the Kamui dimension once he appeared there. The unknown dimension raised his curiosity. He had a strong feeling that the place was different from the ninja world, and he couldn't return by himself. Sensing a disturbance, he immediately turned his gaze to the crack in the space. He was left speechless and shocked as Abido's dead body fell into the dimension. Sasori froze as he continued looking at Abido. Unfortunately, Abido didn't move a single muscle. He was dead as a rock. While Sasori had no reason to feel sad about Abido's death, he wondered in disbelief, if he's dead, how do I get out of this place? Needless to say, if Abido died, Sasori would forever stay trapped in that dimension, unless he somehow mastered space-time ninjutsu and found a path to the ninja world. In the land of rice, the seals on Fujin's eyelids disappeared and he opened his eyes. His gaze stayed on the location where Abido disappeared. There was no happiness on his face. Instead, Fujin sighed and thought, his chakra changed drastically moments before he was hit, so that must be how Izanagi feels. Fujin sighed once again as he analyzed. I miscalculated. In addition to rapidly depleting my chakra reserves, I should have slowed down the speed at which my wind domain encircled this place and shown it to be weaker than it actually is. If I had done that, maybe he might not have retreated right away. As long as we battled, I would have had some opportunities to send my shadow clones into his dimension and start marking the hell out of it. Once that is done, killing him would be possible. Unfortunately, I don't think he'll ever give me such an opportunity now unless I can force him into a battle somehow. Fujin thought a bit before giving up the idea. After all, there was another way to gain access to the Kamui dimension, and it was far easier and without any risks. The winds moved, finally covering the entire area in his wind domain. Unlike his usual wind domain, which covered a radius of 50 meters, this one covered a radius of 500 meters and consisted of nearly 60% of his chakra. The reason why Fujin had gone to such an extent was to project weakness and tempt Abido into attacking Fujin when he was low on chakra. As for low chakra reserves, Fujin was no longer afraid. The artificial chakra lake in his myriad tetragram seal already had enough chakra to fill his reserves twice over. So he could just pretend to have low chakra and continue fighting while secretly having plenty of chakra. Unfortunately, his plans failed due to him going overboard with the wind domain. Fujin maintained his domain while wondering, now then, will he reappear here or in the Kamui dimension? Also, how long does his Izanagi last? I'm pretty sure Danzo's lasted a minute, but Abido's probably lasts much longer considering his battle with Conan. Oh well, though the chances of him reappearing here are low, it's not like I have anything else to do. After all, Zetsu has fled some time back. His speed underground is remarkable. I wonder if that technique can be copied or does it work only for Zetsus? Since he had nothing to do, Fujin's mind wandered, thinking of more ways to increase his strength. Meanwhile, Zetsu reappeared from the ground a long distance away. Even Fujin's space-time sensing technique could no longer sense him. White Zetsu muttered, not only did he kill Deidara, but he also killed Abido. If not for that technique, Abido would have forever been dead and our plans would have been interrupted. Konoha's spectral swordsman is scary. Black Zetsu agreed. Indeed, he is extremely formidable. Not only are his techniques powerful, but he also has great control over them and continuously improves them. Every time we see him in action, he seems to have a new hidden card. That vacuum bullet was significantly faster than any of his other techniques, and he kept it hidden until the proper moment. Fortunately, he didn't know all of Abaido's abilities. White Zetsu added, yes, the bigger threat is his devious and scheming mind. It's difficult to believe that a 16-year-old ninja is this crafty. In the Kamui dimension, Sasori thought, it's quite incredible. I have never seen a body like this. His body has two types of cells. One seems normal, but the other is extremely energetic even though he's dead. What kind of cells are these? Where did he find them, and how did he implant so many in his body without succumbing? Since he was trapped in an unknown space, Sasori decided to study Abaido's body and make a human puppet out of him. He analyzed, if my fears are true and the only way out of that space is space-time ninjutsu, then my only hope is his puppet. If his puppet can retain that ability, I can leave here any time. However, his Sharingan is destroyed. Even though his other eye also has a Sharingan, it feels normal instead of like attaches. Sasori sighed. His body is weird. To Sasori's surprise, the Sharingan in Abaido's left eye suddenly disappeared and his eye went blank, almost as if it had been blinded. Moments later, Abaido's body itself disappeared. Sasori exclaimed in shock, "What in the hell?" His shock intensified infinitely as he sensed a presence. He turned his head to see Abaido standing full of life and completely unharmed. He couldn't help but ask, "What are you?" In the land of rice, Fujin waited patiently for half an hour. However, Abaido never appeared. The only changes in the area covered by the wind domain were that Deidara's body was stored by Fujin, and Sasori's puppets, which were trapped underground, were recovered by his shadow clones. Fujin added 4 more human puppets to his collection. Fujin finally decided, this is long enough, he won't reappear here. A shame, but there is still plenty of time left. I should have more opportunities. If not, I can always create a few. Anyway, time to wrap up this operation. Who'd have thought that this mission to hunt Orochimaru would end in Deidara's death? Poor fellow. If I get my hands on Edo Tensei, I'll give him a few opportunities to show his ultimate explosion to the world. A devious smile appeared on Fujin's face, one that sent chills down the spines of several powerful shinobi who were thousands of kilometers away. Even though they didn't know what it was, they had a bad feeling. The wind domain stirred once again as it transformed into 3 wind clones. Fujin looked at one and said, Zetsu said that Orochimaru was spotted running in the direction of the land of frost. Go in that direction and see if you can find him. If you do, attack him. No need to waste effort on trying to kill him pointlessly, just eliminate others with him. Fujin looked at the second wind clone and instructed, you follow him. If you too find Orochimaru easily, then help him. Otherwise, head into the land of lightning and change the weather a bit. As for you, fly over us in case Akatsuki decides to sneak attack. Since there isn't supposed to be any more fighting, I'll let my chakra recover naturally. The 3 clones nodded and got to work. While Fujin didn't particularly have any reason to send a clone after Orochimaru or inflict more damage on Kumagakure, he had to do something about the chakra he poured in the wind domain. They were just unfortunate to be the nearest. Fujin flickered a few times and reached the Konoha army. The Konoha ninjas were alarmed initially, but relaxed on seeing, sensing, and smelling that it was Fujin. Konomi asked, what happened there? We couldn't observe after the first few minutes. Fujin replied, they had some weird abilities. Anyway, they have retreated for now, but be on the lookout for any sneak attacks. It's time to wrap up the operation here and return to our country. We'll meet up with the other 2 divisions. Konomi nodded without asking any more questions. Even though Fujin didn't give her a clear answer, it wasn't her place to insist on it since she wasn't the commander of the army. She reorganized the ranks and began the retreat. As the army reached the borders of the land of fire, Konomi once again approached Fujin, this time with a worried face. She softly asked, what about them? Wouldn't it create an issue for the village? Fujin raised an eyebrow and asked them. Chapter 792, Losing a Few Hairs. Konomi's eyes twitched as she insisted, yes, them, you know what I am talking about. Fujin indifferently answered, I really don't know. Speechless at Fujin's indifference, Konomi could only stare at him continuously. It was almost as if she wouldn't leave until Fujin answered her. The situation was too serious to be ignored in her opinion. Finally, Fujin sighed and said, tell me, were they cremated? Konomi nodded. Fujin replied, good, were their ashes dispersed? Konomi nodded again. Fujin asked again, were our ninjas involved in the matter warned? Konomi answered, yes, they know about the consequences if they open their mouths. Fujin instructed, good, you should forget about it too then. Don't mention it in any reports and delete it from your brain. You shouldn't stress yourself over such pointless matters. Now go back to your subordinates. They need their general to lead the way. Without waiting for her response, Fujin just flickered away. While he understood her concerns, he had no reason to worry about that issue. That was Shikaku and the Hokkage's job, and Fujin had zero intention of forcefully taking either of their jobs. Unaware of his true thoughts, Konomi was left dumbfounded. She couldn't help but wonder, is it really that simple? I know they have their issues, but would merely feigning ignorance be enough? Her mind refused to accept that it was. However, she wasn't the commander. She couldn't refuse a direct command from Fujin. If she did, she could face the same consequences as others despite her rank. The Konoha army finally entered the Land of Fire and moved towards the Fire Capital. Hoka's and Illumi's divisions were also headed in that direction. Meanwhile, on the eastern borders of the Land of Rice, a force stayed with solemn expressions on their faces. C muttered in a grave tone, "It has been quite some time since we sent the orders. Yet, 206 ninjas have still not returned." Darui and Samui stood silently. They were still in disbelief that Kumo suffered another massive loss in such a short span. Yujiro said, maybe they were held back for some reason. They might return in a few more hours. Even though she said that Yujiro didn't have much confidence in her words, it would have been understandable if a few squads were held up. However, nearly 2/3 of the ninjas being late spelled trouble. There was no doubt that something bad had happened. However, it was a scenario they just couldn't accept. Samui muttered, "Yes, let's wait." Nobody opposed her suggestion. Unfortunately, it wouldn't matter how long they waited. Even if they deployed Kumigakure's entire army in the Land of Rice, they wouldn't even find the ashes of the remaining ninjas. Those Kumo ninjas were simply unlucky to encounter Konoha's forces long before Kumigakure received the news of Fujin's expedition in the Land of Rice. Had it been someone else, they might have avoided conflict, but Fujin didn't see any reason to not accept the offerings from Kumigakure. Combined with the deaths caused by Kimimaro, Kumigakure lost another 222 ninjas. In the span of a month, Kumigakure had lost 1036 ninjas. I was about to face another internal storm inside his village. On the opposite side of the continent, a few more important developments took place. Due to Mengetsu's intervention, the Mizukage faction's main forces were spared from a devastating defeat. The two main armies fought and suffered equally before withdrawing. The rebels' plans to deliver a crushing blow had failed. However, there was another crucial development, one that would play a huge role in future conflicts. Mei took deep breaths. She looked completely exhausted, and her chakra reserves were almost dry. Her clothes were in tatters, and the flesh on her left arm was mangled badly, almost as if several explosive tags had exploded on her arm. Deep cuts were visible on her abdomen, showing how difficult her battle was. A rebel Jounin flickered behind her and respectfully said, "Lady Mei, the Mizukage faction has retreated. We need to treat you right away." Mei didn't move and asked, "How is Ao?" The Jounin answered, "His condition has stabilized. He isn't in danger anymore." Mei relaxed slightly but still didn't accept his help. Instead, she looked at a melting corpse in front of her. She let out a tired sigh and muttered, "Did you have to fight me until such a stage? Why didn't you accept my offer?" The unrecognizable corpse in front of her was none other than Hazuki Mengetsu, a ninja who had mastered all 7 swords of the mist. Mei sighed again and grabbed 4 swords that floated towards her. She muttered, "Spread the news. The Mizukage faction's last swordsman of the mist is dead. I will revive the 7 swordsmen of the mist. Also, destroy his body. Someone like Orochimaru shouldn't get his hands on it." Among the 7 swords, Samehada was with Kisame, Kubikiribacha was in Konoha, Kiba blades were secretly with Fujin, and the last 4 swords were with the Mizukage faction. In the absence of any suitable members, Mengetsu carried all the swords with him. Considering that he was the strongest ninja after Yagura and could use all 4 swords, no one opposed him. However, with his death, all 4 swords landed in Mei's hands. The news of Mengetsu's death and the loss of the swords soon spread among both factions in the Land of Water. The Mizukage faction was demoralized. While Yagura was the leader of the Mizukage faction, Mengetsu was the one who led their forces. And he was the only one who could match Mei on the battlefield. His loss was a huge blow to the Mizukage faction. On the other hand, the rebel camp was even more tense and demoralized. Even Mei wasn't happy. While Mengetsu's death was definitely good news, they all were worried about what followed. So far, Yagura hadn't joined the civil war. However, Mengetsu's death would force him to join the front lines. Every single rebel was worried about facing his rampage on the battlefield. The rebel leaders were no exception. None of them had any confidence in going against Yagura. Even though Mei won against Mengetsu, her victory was hard-fought. There were several instances when she almost died. In addition, her subordinates were much stronger than Mengetsu's underlings. They helped her by ganging up on him. Without them, she could have been the one to lose her life. As such, she knew that she didn't stand a chance against Yagura. The battles in the Land of Water stopped temporarily as both camps waited to see how the fourth Mizukage would react. While they waited, news spread throughout the ninja world. In Iwagakure, Anoki read several reports and thought, the civil war in Kiri is finally in the ending stages. It'll be interesting to see how this ends. The fourth Mizukage is a perfect Jinchuriki. Even without the tailed beast, he's a formidable shinobi. Do the rebels have the means to defeat someone like that? Anoki thought a bit before shaking his head. It doesn't matter. As long as the two factions don't unite, Kiri would be severely weakened. Even though they have lost the most among any great village, their ninjas are also the most prepared for a war, so despite their lower numbers, they could cause trouble to any major village. However, if a faction is completely wiped out, that would no longer be the case. Anoki shifted his gaze to another report, and a puzzled expression appeared on his face. He wondered, what is that brat up to? Why are Kumo's forces so erratic? It almost feels like he's up to something, but it doesn't feel like he's preparing for war. Did he suffer some loss again? Just like the report stated, panic had gripped Kumagakure. I was facing endless headaches, and he couldn't even lash out in rage, for the blame lay with him once again. 16 ninjas had died and 206 went missing. Kumagakure became the first village in the history of the ninja world to have 864 ninjas classified as missing, at the same time breaking their previous record of 658 missing ninjas. Sitting on his desk, I couldn't help but wonder. Even though he didn't have any proof, Darui said that he believed Suzuki Fujin was involved in the previous incident. This time, he is definitely involved. I can understand if my ninjas die. I could accept responsibility and take revenge. However, what do I do when they go missing? How do hundreds of ninjas even go missing? The more he thought, the more enraged the fourth Reikage became. Fujin's actions had completely infuriated him. Unfortunately, he couldn't act. The internal politics were a complete mess. He couldn't afford to take a step outside the village. While I lost more than a few hairs due to the headache, Suna's council met once again. In front of them was a scroll. Everyone looked at it solemnly. Finally, Goza muttered, Konoha finally sent an official message. They want to talk with us in the Fire Capital. Chapter 793, Sand Slayer. Silence engulfed Sunagakure's council room as the council members pondered seriously. While Konoha was attacking Otagakure and the rebels in the Land of Grass, Sunagakure was continuously preparing for an all-out assault from Konoha. They had deployed thousands of ninjas strategically throughout the desert and planted tens of thousands of traps. Sunagakure had been transformed into a fortress. When the news of Otagakure's destruction arrived, they believed Konoha would turn their forces to them. However, they received an invitation to negotiate instead. The council wasn't sure how genuine Konoha was, whether they truly wanted to negotiate, or if it was just a trick to lower their guard before the real assault began. Goza sighed and muttered, if this is a genuine invitation, it might just save our village. However, is it? Konoha's schemes run deep and they must be pissed off at our betrayal. I'm afraid that this is a trap to eliminate some of our top ninjas to make their invasion easier. After all, from our sources, both Konoha armies are making their way to the Fire Capital, where the negotiations will happen. The council had solemn faces. Ebizo said, it's unlikely that Konoha would harm our negotiators. They have a reputation to maintain. The Hyuga incident showed us that. Even in the worst case, they would just arrest the ones who go there. Tajiro said, don't forget their Yamanaka clan. Even though we attacked Konoha, our Keizukage was killed by Orochimaru and used by him with the Edo Tensei Jutsu. Konoha isn't sure if we attacked them or were fooled by Orochimaru into attacking them. Perhaps the negotiation is just a way for them to read the memories of whoever we send to negotiate and decide whether to attack us or not. Even though others wouldn't be sure whether Konoha is telling the truth or not, Konoha, right now, is strong enough to not care as long as they know it. To make matters worse, the external conditions are excellent for them. The civil war in the Land of Water is entering a crucial stage. They can't interfere elsewhere. Kumagakure is suffering from some internal trouble too. They were our biggest hope, but they have been a disappointment so far. We can't count on them. The only forces that are intact are Iwagakure. However, the Suna Council was well aware of Anoki's nature. Despite such an insult, he hadn't made a move. Instead, he had already recalled the forces he deployed on the borders with the Land of Grass. As such, the Sunagakure situation had become far more grim. Suddenly, Chiyo said, I don't think Konoha would read the memories of our council members. Well, at least not as long as the more mature figures are making the decisions. However, the risk is indeed high. We can't send any council member to negotiate. Ryusa argued, if we don't send any council member, Konoha would assume we aren't serious about negotiating. That could force them to act even if they don't want to due to the losses and the potential of a wider conflict. After all, even though Kumigakure is in disarray and Iwagakure is watching, they would be wary of what Konoha did in the land of rice. Chiyo nodded and said, "Of course, that is why we need to expand the council and accept 2 new members who aren't sure of what really happened, and in order to prove that they aren't just scapegoats, they will be treated as full-fledged members even in the future. They'll have as much power as any of you here." The council room grew quiet once again. Expanding the council wouldn't mean they would magically get new responsibilities, power, and resources. Instead, the current members would have to give up some of their power to ensure that the new members stand on par with them. It would be a huge loss, something that none of them would accept without resisting under normal circumstances. Unfortunately, these weren't normal circumstances. Even though they were unwilling, no one opposed Chiyo's suggestion. After all, their lives were far more important. One by one, everyone agreed. Knowing how ugly political conflicts could get, Chiyo and Ebizo made everyone decide what they would give to the new members. Once everything was settled to their satisfaction, Ebizo turned his gaze to Sajo and asked, "Is it done?" Sajo nodded and replied, "Yes, I have been spreading the rumors for the last week. By now, everyone in the village should be believing it. Of course, the experienced ninjas are suspicious, but that is out of our control." Ebizo replied, "That should be more than enough." He turned his gaze to the others, and the council finally began discussing how to negotiate with Konoha if Konoha was serious. They also discussed how much leeway they should give to the new members who would be negotiating on Sunagakure's behalf. While the council was engaged in an intense discussion, the common people and even the ninjas in Sunagakure were indulging in gossip. Even though Sajo spread the rumors, he did it differently as compared to Fujin and Hiruzen. Due to the sensitive nature of the information, he did it very slowly so as not to arouse any suspicion. Hence, the discussions were reaching their peak just now. "Did you hear Lord Fourth was assassinated by Orochimaru, one of the Sanins, and controlled with some forbidden jutsu?" "Yeah, I did. It's scary to think about. I never imagined that someone would fool our leaders into going to war with our ally, Konoha. Actually, I heard that our leaders were reluctant. However, since the orders came from Lord Fourth, they couldn't do anything about it and were forced to follow." 2 civilians in Sunagakure were discussing when a third person overheard them and buted in loudly. "It's all that evil snake's fault. He caused the deaths of our beloved Keisuke and hundreds of our brave ninjas. I just hope that Konoha isn't fooled by that snake and works with us to eliminate that damned snake for good." A person sitting nearby heard his passionate remarks and said, "Actually, I heard that Konoha sent Suzuki Fujin to hunt down that snake. Even though Orochimaru ran away, his forces were completely destroyed." His words surprised the 3 and they asked, "Suzuki Fujin? Is he the same as the spectral swordsman who butchered 200 of our ninjas?" "A lot more. I heard rumors saying that he was also the one who killed dozens of our ninjas and defamed our Keisuke a few years ago. I heard he was also the one who sealed our Keisuke, who was being controlled by Orochimaru." "Fuck, that many, and he also sealed Lord Fourth. Damn, does he have a vendetta against us?" "Who knows? He is almost as hateful as the cursed White Fang. Many ninjas are now calling him the Sand Slayer. The ones who came back alive from the attack are terrified at the mere mention of his name. I heard one Chunin even passed out and wet his pants. Holy crap, what sort of demon is he? Shit, calling him Sand Slayer is correct. I hope he never visits this village." Everyone around him nodded promptly. While they weren't ninjas, none of them wanted to see Sunagakure fall. Similar discussions were happening throughout Sunagakure, giving Fujin a new moniker, the Sand Slayer. Ironically, the number of Sunagakure ninjas Fujin slaughtered was nowhere near the number of Kumigakure ninjas he killed. Unlike the civilians, who cheerfully indulged in gossip, most of the ninjas were tense. They realized that there was a high chance that they would have to go to war. Hearing the rumors about Fujin, fear gripped most hearts. One of those ninjas frowned while roaming the streets and hearing the rumors. He thought, bullshit. Those council members were definitely supporting the attack. The ninjas had been training for nearly half a year to prepare for an assault. There's no way Rasa was controlled by Orochimaru for all this time. This person wore Sunagakure's headband and Chunin vest, but was actually a Konoha spy. He decided, "I need to report this to the village. They have finally relaxed the security around the village since most forces are preparing for the defense. I'll also mention the rumors as it seems like Sunagakure doesn't want a war right now. They are very weak after the death of Rasa and all those elites." Chapter 794, Shikaku makes a move. Just like in Sunagakure, the council met in Konoha. In the absence of Hiruzen and his successor, the head seat was left empty. Fujin's seat was also empty, as were the seats of the civilian council members. Koharu started the meeting by asking, "Did Suna receive the message?" Shikaku nodded. "They should have received it by now. Their reply should come in a few hours." There isn't much suspense as to what it'd be. Everyone agreed. Under the current circumstances, there was no way Sunagaki would refuse to talk. Senju Hiramasa asked, "Shikaku, were you the one who started the discussion currently happening throughout the village?" Shikaku answered, "Yes, though it wasn't my decision entirely. Lord Third had asked me to do it before the attack." Hiramasa replied, "Thought so. This feels like his work. Spread it outside of the village as well, especially in the land of wind. Though it won't have a direct impact on Sunagaku's council, it'll reinforce the fear in the hearts of their ninjas. Though intangible, it'll increase the pressure on their council, which would help us during the negotiation." Shikaku smirked and said, "Don't worry, it is already set in motion." Hiramasa chuckled and replied, "I should have expected that." He turned his gaze towards others and said, "Now then, it's time to discuss whom to send to negotiate with Sunagaku. Have you thought about it as well, Shikaku?" Shikaku nodded. "Yes, as the two most experienced ninjas as well as the ones who have dealt with such matters the most, I believe Elder Hamura and Elder Koharu would be the optimal candidates to lead our team. In addition, we'll also need to send a few clan leaders. Any of you want to volunteer?" He turned his gaze to his fellow clan leaders. Tsum was the first one to speak up. "I'll go. I want to see what those geniuses were thinking to attack us." Inoichi said, "Well, I doubt they'd risk sending anyone important due to my clan's abilities, so chewing them won't get us any useful intel, though I suppose it'll be great for applying more pressure. I'll go too to add to the pressure." Hiramasa said, "I'll go as well. It's been a long time since I left the village. I want to see what this generation of Sunagaku's leaders are like." Shikaku said, "All right, that should be plenty. Fujin will join the negotiating team as well. You can meet him directly at the fire capital. I have already explained to him his role. It'll be similar to what he did against Kusagaku, except he won't be leading the team." Tsum suddenly sighed and asked, "Are you trying to give away my job, Shikaku? How am I supposed to chew them off if he scares them?" Shikaku chuckled and said, "It'll be good to have a partner in crime once. Be careful, though. His threats generally cross several lines at the same time. I'm sure Elder Hamura can attest to that." Everyone glanced at Hamura, who immediately recalled the nightmarish moment he experienced in Kusagaku. His expression alone was enough to make the council wary of Fujin. Thankfully, there wouldn't be any direct danger this time. Shikaku added, "I have asked him to rein himself in, but I'm not sure how much he'll follow. However, he usually has a positive impact on the village at the end of the day, so he shouldn't be too much of a problem." Everyone nodded, not thinking too much about it. Unknown to them, Shikaku sighed internally. Finally, someone else will have to endure that troublesome kid. Even though he was the one who conducted the operation in the land of rice, I was the one who spent several sleepless nights to ensure that nothing went wrong. Even if he does something crazy in the fire capital, I'll push the responsibility and work on the elders. Let them deal with his crazy ideas for once. If they do a good enough job, I'll let them deal with his future shenanigans too." For the first time since the meeting began, Hayashi asked, "Have you decided how to approach the negotiations? Fujin's recent expedition to the land of rice should have increased the pressure on Sunagaku's council, so drawing out the negotiations would be a good way to make them buckle under pressure. However, there is a hidden risk. As good as the move to eliminate Otagaku was, it was also a huge slap to the Tsuchikige's face. In addition, Kumagaku has been very unstable for some reason. The Reikage might look for a war to divert the focus of their public. There is a possibility of a three-way alliance between Sunagaku, Iwagaku, and Kumagaku if we stall too long." Hisashi pointed out the worst-case scenario for Konoha. He wasn't incorrect. With Konoha winning 3 wars in a very short time, the pressure on other villages would increase. It could force them together. Of course, all 3 villages had a lot of hatred between them, making any alliance between them brittle. However, the risk to Konoha was real. Considering that the main reason they weren't attacking Sunagaku was to avoid a 3-front war, the negotiations would be pointless if they were to result in the same. Shikaku replied, "Yes, I have already calculated. From my analysis, the 3 villages should be contacting each other right now. However, a proper alliance is unlikely at this moment. Neither Sunagaku nor Kumagaku are in a position to start a new war, and Iwagaku wouldn't lead the war. So the only danger is if Kumagaku launches a suicidal attack. Fortunately, that is very unlikely unless something else changes. So we have time to stretch the negotiation. Preferably, we could extend it to 3-5 rounds in the span of 2-3 weeks. Any longer, it'll become disadvantageous for us. I'll keep an eye on the movements of other villages and keep the negotiating team informed." Hamura and Koharu nodded. The council began finalizing their demands for the first round. Needless to say, at the start of negotiations, quite a few of their demands would be rather unreasonable, so Konoha would have some space to negotiate. While the council discussed the demands, the people in Konoha were discussing some matters as well. In a bar, a group of ninjas were enjoying themselves when one of them said, "Did you hear? Councilman Fujin led an army to the land of rice and annihilated Otagakyo." "Ha, who hasn't heard of that? I heard from my clan leader that he eliminated over 700 Otagakyo ninjas. Orochimaru's forces are finished." "Yeah, I heard even Orochimaru tucked his tail between his legs and ran away when Councilman Fujin reached his base. Order should be restored soon in the land of rice, and we'll likely get all the missions from that country. Hee, Councilman Fujin surely is great." The group laughed, realizing that plenty of high-income missions would soon be available to them. One of them said, "I used to think the rumors about him were exaggerated. Now it seems like even they didn't do him justice. Councilman Fujin is insanely good. No one even knew that he made a move against Otagakure until it was over. His moniker is truly appropriate. A swordsman who appears and disappears like a ghost. Whoever called him the spectral swordsman did a very good job." The Nara ninja in the group shook his head and said, "While the name is good, we can't use it. Besides, why should we use the name our enemies gave him?" Everyone looked at the Nara ninja as he continued. When Orochimaru interfered in the second round of the Chunin exam, Councilman Fujin faced him alone and forced him to retreat. When the village was attacked by the combined forces of Sunagakure and Otagakure, Councilman Fujin stepped up and annihilated 3 divisions before they understood what was happening. He also stopped the Edo Tensei summons and sealed all of them. He even stopped the legendary White Fang and protected us. And he also led our forces to swiftly take revenge for the injuries Orochimaru inflicted on Lord Third. No matter who our enemies are or what the situation is, Councilman Fujin strikes them down. He is the sword that strikes fear in our enemies. We should call him Konoha's sword instead. Only such a title could do justice to what he has done for our village." The ninjas around him were moved by his passionate speech and immediately agreed. The ones around them heard the passionate speech too, and soon the entire bar cheered to Konoha's sword. Similar discussions were happening throughout the village due to Shikaku's moves. By the end of the day, everyone had heard the title and referred to Fujin by it. It would soon spread throughout the land of fire and the ninja world. Fujin, who reached close to the fire capital with his army, was completely unaware of the 2 new monikers he gained. Only time would tell how he'll react to this move made by Hiruzen and Shikaku. Chapter 795, Explode on Sight. 2 individuals exited the Sunagakure council room while deep in thought. As they walked, one of them sighed and muttered to approach the Wind Daimyo at this time. "Sigh, will it work? It's no secret that the Daimyo doesn't like Sunagakure and prefers good relations with Konoha instead." The lady next to him replied, "He may prefer Konoha, but he is the Daimyo of the Land of Wind. He wouldn't like to see his country being invaded by Konoha. He'll be even more desperate than us for peace. So we don't need to worry about whose side he'll be on, Yura. Of course, that isn't entirely good news, as he may try to force us to accept some unfavorable terms. However, anything is better than an all-out war against Konoha at this point." Yura replied, "That is exactly what I'm worried about, Arisa. Our economy is already in bad shape due to his preferences. It'll be even worse if more restrictions are imposed upon us. Anyway, I suppose the council already considered these aspects before making the decision. We can only hope that we apply enough pressure on Konoha to stop them from making another audacious move. We need to prepare for the negotiations." Arisa nodded. She and Yura were the 2 new members of the Sunagakure Council. Tenma Arima was from a civilian background, but had considerable influence due to being a strategist and an elite jounin. Yura had a significant influence among the Sunagakure ninjas too. Unfortunately for Sunagakure, he was Sasori's spy. Within minutes of the end of the Sunagakure Council meeting, 2 squads left their village and traveled at high speed. One squad was headed to Iwagakure, while the other was headed to Kumagakure. At the same time, a news spread throughout Sunagakure which brought relief to most of their ninjas. "Thank God, I was so worried." "Yeah, me too. I'm so glad the council made this decision. My wife and kids were so worried for me." "Yeah, we don't have to fight that monster. We can flee as soon as we see him, even if we are at war." Realizing the fear of Fujin that had penetrated into the bones of the Sunagakure ninjas, the council finally issued a flee-on-sight warning for Fujin, just like Iwagakure did a long time ago. It restored the morale of their ninjas to an extent. However, there were a few hundred ninjas who weren't relieved. Instead, they became even more worried. "Shit, does this mean that we will go to war with Konoha? Fuck, what use is the flee-on-sight order? How the fuck are we supposed to run from that demon?" Exactly. That monster slaughtered 200 of our comrades in the blink of an eye. Poor guys didn't even know what hit them. What the hell is the council thinking? They should avoid war at all costs. This was a short conflict. If we start an official war, he'll make White Fang look like a saint. I don't even want to imagine him hunting our forces for several weeks, let alone several months. Needless to say, the council was well aware of this when Baki spoke up. Unfortunately, they were out of options. They could only be thankful for the fact that they had dispatched nearly 3,000 ninjas before Baki's group returned to Sunagakure and spread Fujin's infamy. As such, they were unaffected and still in good morale. A similar order was passed by Ai in Kumagakure. However, their ninjas had a very different reaction. Instead of relief, most ninjas had solemn expressions. Ai's orders were very different from Sunagakure's council. Mabui sighed and thought, to send such an order in such tumultuous times, Reikage-sama's reputation will drop even more. Unfortunately, there was no choice. Trouble doesn't seem to stop. If we delay, who knows how many more ninjas would go missing. Instead of fleeing from Fujin, Ai ordered his ninjas to attack Fujin and blow themselves up as soon as they encountered him if Fujin or his subordinates showed any signs of hostility. Of course, such a drastic order resulted in an immediate backlash and opposition from the council. The Reikage and his close aides braced for another political shitstorm. At the same time, he dispatched one squad to get in touch with Iwagakure. A kilometer away from the fire capital, the three divisions met once again. Fujin let the army set up camps and rest. After all, they had been very active for over a week without much rest. In addition, Fujin needed them to be ready for the future. The leaders of the army met in the main tent. Fujin glanced around and said, "It's good to see everyone here is safe and sound. How did the war go?" Hoka sighed and said, "It was going well initially, but we fell into a trap. Though their forces were far weaker, we lost several ninjas due to their momentum. 26 ninjas in my division lost their lives. Another 84 ninjas were seriously injured, but their lives aren't in danger anymore. They should make a full recovery soon. We sent them to Konoha on our way. Nearly 700 other ninjas took some injuries due to their suicidal assault, but most have been healed so far. The rest should be healed in a few days." Illumi added, "Since Hoka's division was attacked first, we didn't completely fall into their trap, so our losses were lower. Still, we lost 11 ninjas and another 46 were seriously injured. Luckily, they'll make a full recovery too." Fujin replied, "Kajero was a very experienced and shrewd commander, so this isn't surprising. Had his forces been stronger, I would have been forced to shelve my plans for Otagakure. Regardless, I hope the two of you gained valuable experience." Hoka and Illumi nodded. Fujin sighed and muttered, "That's good. Life must go on, but it's a shame that 40 of our ninjas died." The tent stayed silent for a few moments. Hoka, Renjiro, and Illumi realized, so he only lost 3 ninjas in the campaign against Otagakure. Fujin continued, "Anyway, considering the dead and the wounded, our army has lost 170 ninjas. We still have nearly 2,900 ninjas and can act if need be." Hoka asked, "Who will we make a move against next?" Fujin answered, "The negotiation team will soon begin talks with Sunagakure in the fire capital. I'll be joining them too. What we do next will depend on how the talks go. If they go well, the army will likely be recalled or transformed into patrol units to maintain order in the Land of Fire. If they don't—" Everyone became serious as Fujin paused. He looked at everyone and continued authoritatively, "If they don't, we'll act as the vanguard and begin our assault on the Land of Wind." Fujin's statement was like a bomb dropped in the main tent. Even Renjiro didn't expect that Konoha would actually attack Sunagakure. He thought, "Is the council serious about attacking? What changed?" From the talks I had with the clan leader, it felt like the council had no interest in continuing the war. Renjiro's thoughts were accurate. Fujin didn't have any official orders to attack Sunagakure. In fact, he wasn't even asked to prepare for an invasion. It was just Fujin taking the initiative to prepare. And it had something to do with the role he was supposed to play in the negotiations. Konomi asked gravely, "Would we really invade one of the great villages?" Fujin answered, "It is unlikely. The council is opposed to war, especially considering that the 5th Hokage has yet to take power officially. Whether it is Lord Jirya or Lady Tsunade who takes charge, neither supports unnecessary wars. In addition, I doubt Sunagakure wants a war right now. However, there is no reason for us to not prepare for the worst-case scenario. So, prepare the army assuming you'll receive orders to march out at any moment. No need to train right now, just let them get sufficient rest and ensure that even the minor injuries are healed." The 3 generals nodded. Renjiro asked, "Will you leave for the fire capital right away?" Fujin shook his head and answered, "No, our team will arrive tomorrow morning. I'll rest with the army and join them tomorrow." Renjiro smiled and thought, Not bad. Being with the army for as long as he can is a good way for any commander to increase their morale. The group discussed some more important topics before being dismissed. Fujin spent the remaining day catching up with Hoka and Renjiro while interacting with the army following Renjiro's suggestions. In the night, Fujin stayed up in his tent while writing a report on a scroll. The report looked strange and unreadable because it was encoded in a cipher. Very few ninjas knew how to decode this cipher, as its secrets were taught only to a handful of elites in Konoha. Fujin went through his reports once while thinking, Shikaku won't come to the negotiations. A bummer, it could have been fun to negotiate alongside him. Oh well, since he's being lazy again, I need to be a responsible Konoha ninja and give him a few sleepless nights. After all, our Jounin commander and best strategist has to be in top shape all the time. Without wasting any time, Fujin dispatched a messenger bird to Konoha before sleeping soundly. Chapter 796, Hiruzen's Substitutes. Another tiresome day, Shikaku sighed as he let out a yawn. His wife looked at him and chuckled. Your work won't decrease just because you sigh and complain. In fact, it always has the opposite impact. Shikaku tiredly replied, It's all that brat's fault. Until Lord Jirya brings back Lady Tsunade, I'll have to suffer irrespective of how much I sigh. His laziness soured his wife's mood, and she immediately scolded. You should show more enthusiasm. Your laziness has been influencing Shikamaru. He is already showing signs of the same laziness as you and complains about everything. Shikaku knew very well that anything he said would only make his wife more upset. As such, he just listened to her nagging before falling onto his bed. Within moments, he fell asleep. While he always complained, he had really been working a lot as he was handling the hawkage duties along with his duties at the same time. Unfortunately, merely a minute after he fell asleep, his eyes opened up as their bell rang. Shikaku immediately became serious and got up. He quickly moved to the door while thinking, to contact me at this hour, did something happen? However, what can be so important? Our armies are back in our territories, and the negotiation team shouldn't have reached yet. Shikaku's mind immediately analyzed a few dozen scenarios before opening the door. An Ambu ninja handed him a scroll and reported, We just received an extremely important message from Suzuki Fujin. He added a small note to hand the scroll to you directly and immediately. Shikaku accepted the scroll and said, All right, I'll look into it. The Ambu ninja flickered away while Shikaku entered his house again. He opened the scroll and laid his eyes on the contents inside. As soon as he did, his eyes twitched as he wondered, did he have to use this cipher or did he do it just to increase my workload? The cipher team can't decode this message. I'll have to do it all by myself. Sigh, I hope this message is actually important and solves some of my troubles instead of increasing them. Though unwilling, Shikaku spent half an hour decoding the message before reading the entire scroll. His eyes widened as he thought, This! Shit, I told him to decrease my workload, not increase it. Why did he order the death of over 200 Kumagakure ninjas? And what does he mean by doing it silently? It may not have been obvious the last time, but it is very obvious this time. Besides, just because they couldn't react the last time doesn't mean that we can keep poking them. At some point, they'll explode in our faces even if it hurts them. I'll have to now calculate how they'll react, and if we need to prepare for any attacks from them as well. Shikaku wanted to cry. He had just pawned off the work of negotiations on the elders and hoped to have a few easy days at last. If Tsunade returned to the village in those days, he'd be free again. Unfortunately, Fujin denied him that luxury by needlessly antagonizing Kumagakure again. Even if Tsunade returned, Shikaku would have to pay attention to Kumagakure's movements. Unlike Shikaku, who had a sleepless night, Fujin slept soundly. By the time he woke up, Konoha's negotiation team had already arrived in the camp. Fujin freshened up before walking into the main tent, where the elders, clan leaders, and the leaders of the army had already gathered. Fujin yawned and muttered, You guys are up awfully early. Fujin's comment earned an irritated look from the ones present. The negotiation team had arrived even before the sun rose. They wanted to discuss some matters before heading to the fire capital. However, Fujin instructed his guards to not disturb him unless an enemy attacked. While the elders and the clan leaders were very respected, their charisma fell quite short of Fujin at the moment. Especially among the ninjas, Fujin led to 2 quick victories. The fact that Orochimaru ran away without even facing Fujin improved his image in their hearts even more. Considering that Orochimaru was one of the Sanins, many rated him even above them. As such, no one was allowed to disturb him. Koharu commented snarkily, Not all of us can afford to sleep as long as we want. Fujin took his seat and lazily replied, Maybe if you chase the snake around for a week, perhaps you might be forced to. Fujin's comment left Koharu speechless instantly. She didn't think Fujin would retort in this manner. Hamura's left eye twitched as he thought, his tongue has gotten even sharper. Sigh, I hope Shikaku talks some sense into this boy. Otherwise, it is very likely that he'll start a war between the two villages single-handedly. Hiramasa smirked and thought, as sharp as ever. Still, this isn't the first time he retorted this sharply to the elders. Does he have some animosity towards them? It can't be just because they sided with Danzo. After all, he has a decent relationship with Hamura. Noichi and Tsume watched the interaction with amusement as well, while Hoka, Konomi, and Illumi were shocked. None of them expected Fujin to talk back to one of the elders in such a manner. After all, Koharu's comment, though uncalled for, wasn't particularly harsh considering that Fujin made them wait for over 3 hours. Fujin ignored everyone's reactions and asked, "Anyway, why did you call me here? Sunagakure's negotiation team should be at least 3 days away, assuming they dispatched them by now." Hamura answered, "That is true, but we need to prepare so that we are on the same page during the negotiations." Fujin nodded and said, "Yeah, Shikaku-san informed me. Let's go with the same tactic we used against Kyusa." Hamura coughed loudly to interrupt Fujin. He immediately said, "No, we can't treat Sunagakure as Kyusagakure. The two villages are very different, so are the issues we are negotiating." Koharu added, "Kyusagakure is just a minor village that specializes in diplomacy. Sunagakure, even though weakened, is still a great village." "Thaug," Fujin cut her off and said, "their Kage is dead, their Jinchuriki is unstable and still a kid, and their only rank S ninja is even older than you two. The only two factors that differentiate them are their larger forces and a formidable terrain, both of which could be dealt with in several ways. So there isn't much of a need to treat them differently. While the situation is indeed different, it is even more favorable for us. They're the ones who attacked us and lost embarrassingly. It gives us so many more avenues of applying pressure on them." An awkward silence appeared in the room. Renjiro's eyes twitched as he thought, "I had this feeling yesterday. There is no doubt about it. He wants to carry out a few strikes on Sunagakure as well." At the same time, Hoka thought, "Even though they were the ones who attacked us, I can't help but feel bad for them now. Poor fellows, I guess this is karma." Konomi, who had seen how Fujin operated firsthand, wondered, does he plan on disarming Sunagakure's traps and eliminating their ambush squads one by one like how we did in the Land of Rice? A couple of weeks ago, I would have dismissed that idea as crazy. However, after what I have seen, of course, the ones on the council wouldn't agree to Fujin's words. Hiramasa finally intervened. "Fujin, while your statements are logical, you're missing one aspect. That is pride. Kyusagakure is a minor village that specializes in diplomacy. Compromising isn't humiliating for them. However, Sunagakure has the pride of a great village. If we humiliate them too much, they'll refuse and go to war even at the risk of annihilation. Even though we are in good shape right now, an all-out war against a great village is not something Konoha can afford to do. Anything short of a decisive victory like you had against Otagakure will be an open invitation for Kumagakure and Iwagakure to attack us. In fact, we believe they may already be in talks, so let's calm down and discuss." A smile appeared on his face as he added, "Besides, even though our approach should be cordial, our demands will be very strict. So relax and let's continue the discussion." Since Fujin had good relations with the Senju clan, Fujin didn't reply aggressively. Besides, while his ideas were good, Fujin didn't particularly care whether Konoha went to war with Sunagakure or not. He just wanted to mess with the two elders since Hiruzen was out of commission and couldn't be bothered. Fujin replied, "All right." With Hiramasa playing the mediator, the tensions calmed down and the group finally started discussing their negotiation strategy. Chapter 797, A Warm and Not So Warm Welcome. "Deidara died on your watch?" Nagato asked emotionlessly. However, Abaido could feel a sense of disdain directed at him in Nagato's voice. The image of Uchiha Madara he created in Nagato's and Konan's minds long ago was slightly shaken. After all, if Madara couldn't stop a teenager, was there any reason to treat him like he was in his prime? Abaido understood it. Unfortunately, there wasn't much he could do considering that something else had happened during the battle which was far more humiliating than Deidara's death. He ignored their hidden disdain and replied, "Deidara may have betrayed Akatsuki. Or rather, he had some dealings with Fujin. It was why I didn't save him. Fujin turned on him to ensure that we didn't get any information." Nagato and Konan were surprised by the revelation but didn't care much. After all, Deidara's death didn't affect Akatsuki much and Akatsuki was already dealing with another traitor. Abaido continued, "As for Suzuki Fujin, he is a rather odd young man. Don't underestimate him if you face him in battle. Zetsu will inform you about his abilities." Abaido was about to leave when Nagato said, "Sasori is without a partner once again. We'll have to find a replacement for Deidara." Abaido nodded before disappearing into his dimension. Conan muttered, "To think the mighty Uchiha Madara failed to protect a rank S ninja from a young shinobi. I knew he had lost his strength, but I didn't think he'd deteriorate to this condition." Nagato replied, "Even so, his ability can't be underestimated." Conan nodded. She had no intention of taking him lightly. While they were allies, she was extremely suspicious of him and was preparing a plan in case he ever targeted Nagato. "I didn't expect that boy would force you to use Izanagi," Black Zetsu muttered in an underground base when he noticed a crack in the space. Abaido appeared in the room while taking his mask off. A couple of cuts were visible on his face and the side of his head. In addition, his left eye had gone blind. Abaido said, "Yes, thankfully Sasori doesn't know about this jutsu and thinks it was some sort of genjutsu. Otherwise, my image would have been hurt even more." White Zetsu said, "Suzuki Fujin is dangerous. This is the second time he killed an Akatsuki member. If you hadn't shown up, Sasori might have been killed as well. I'm afraid Kakuzu's team wouldn't stand a chance against him either. Unless Pain or you move, only Itachi and Kisame could win, assuming he doesn't convince Kisame that Itachi is a spy." Abaido agreed. Fujin's abilities were already quite strong. In addition, he was also excellent at scheming. Together, these two aspects made him extremely dangerous. He thought for a bit and said, "In the next gathering, inform everyone about Fujin's abilities and the threat he possesses. I doubt they'll take the warning too seriously, but they'll at least be prepared. Inform me if any other team ends up confronting him. I'm interested in seeing how many more hidden cards he has in his arsenal." Zetsu replied, "I will." Abaido walked into another room while saying, "Also, keep an eye on Nagato. I doubt he'd betray me, but it's better to be careful than be caught off guard." Abaido focused on healing himself and replacing his left eye with another 3 Tamo Sharingan. After completing their discussions, Fujin left the army in Renjiro's care and moved to the fire capital along with the negotiation team. As he laid his eyes on the grand city, he raised an eyebrow and muttered, "That's strange. Is there some sort of celebration or a welcome party?" Hiramasa chuckled and said, "The latter. They do this once in a while when important people from Konoha show up. Considering our recent victories, they also have a reason to celebrate. What better time to do that than now, when 6 of Konoha's council members are arriving?" He turned his gaze towards Fujin and said, "You played a huge role in all 3 of our victories. The news has already spread throughout the country, and people have heard the stories of your strength, courage, and valor. They would want to see you in person." Fujin glanced at the entrance of the city. He could see that both sides of the road were jam-packed by common people. He sighed internally. As a ninja, fame is not exactly good. On the contrary, it is quite detrimental, as no one would underestimate you anymore, and your enemies would conduct extensive research on your abilities. Unfortunately, I don't think I can keep hiding in the shadows anymore. My movements in the last month and a half have been too spectacular, and unlike my previous actions, they were all conducted in the daylight. Luckily, I still have a good number of my abilities hidden alongside a couple of identities that could still be underestimated by others. As soon as the group stepped into the city, their eyes landed on the fire daimyo, who was present with several other nobles and officials to welcome Konoha's group. Fujin thought, now that's a rare sight. The daimyo of the 5 great nations rarely engage in such displays. Even though they don't hold much power, they still have to keep up appearances. I suppose this just shows how important the talks with Sunagakure will be. Hamura and Koharu stepped ahead to meet the daimyo. With a smile on his face, Hamura said, "Daimyo-sama, I didn't expect to see you here." The fire daimyo laughed cordially and said, "How could I not when you 2 are coming here? Welcome to my humble city. It's good to see you 2 again." The 3 elder people interacted like they hadn't met for years, even though fire daimyo had been in Konoha just a week ago. While they chatted, the spectators were looking at the Konoha ninjas, with over 90% of them staring at Fujin. While the crowd maintained silence to show respect to the daimyo, a few murmurs were heard. "Who among them is Konoha's sword? Of course it's him. He is the only young one here. Gosh, he's so young. So he's Konoha's sword. It's so cool to see him." While the murmurs were soft, Fujin's ears picked it up. He wondered in confusion, "Konoha's sword, what in the—" Suddenly, the fire daimyo turned his head towards Fujin and said, "It's good to see Konoha's sword too. Everyone here has been waiting to see the young hero. Even my grandkids pestered me all day, ha ha ha." Fujin's left eye involuntarily twitched as he wondered, so they were indeed referring to me. Which asshole gave me such a lousy title? Before Fujin could say anything, Hiramasa laughed, patted Fujin's back and said, "I forgot to mention it earlier. In light of your recent achievements, everyone in Konoha has been referring to you by that title." The name caught on very quickly. The daimyo smiled and said, "Oh, I didn't know you were unaware. I'm glad that you heard it from me then. It's good to see you again too, Hiramasa." The group interacted for a few minutes before taking the main road to Daimyo's palace while being cheered by thousands of people. Fujin didn't pay much attention to the proceedings and instead wondered, how did I get such a title, and how did it spread so quickly? He thought for a bit before concluding, a title generally spreads as a result of an incident, several incidents, or a feature of that ninja. My previous title spread purely due to my actions. As I continued assassinating, the title caught on very quickly. I guess I also got credit for some of the kills that weren't done by me. However, Konoha's sword. This title is a little weird. Instead of describing me, it's a title that'll boost the morale of Konoha ninjas. There's no way an enemy would give me this title. It's definitely Shikaku's. No, he's too lazy to take the initiative to do something like this. It must be that old fox. Sai, why is he messing with me while in a coma? Is he really in a coma, or just pretending to be to avoid paperwork and force either of his students to finally accept his seat? Fujin couldn't help but sigh. While he didn't care what moniker he was referred to with, he had one small complaint. Why is my new title lamer than my old one? Couldn't they think of something better than Spectral Swordsman? Sai, I need to prepare a recovery gift for Hiruzen for when he finally wakes up. After a meeting in his palace, the daimyo got Konoha's group settled in the best hotel in the fire capital. 5 days later, Sunagakure's negotiation team arrived. Even though they received a welcome, it wasn't exactly warm. Even experienced leaders like Yura and Arisa became nervous, let alone the weaker ninjas following them. Chapter 798, Nerves, Danger, Bait. Before Sunagakure's negotiation team entered the fire capital, they were greeted with a completely unexpected sight. Though the path to the city was open, thousands of ninjas surrounded the path. While they weren't as visible as the civilians in Fire Capital, they didn't bother hiding their presence. As such, experienced ninjas like Yura and Arisa and Sensors could feel the vast amount of ninjas in the trees around the paths. Even the ones who couldn't sense them were unnerved as they felt the gazes of hundreds of bloodthirsty ninjas lock onto them. After all, though Konoha didn't suffer much due to their attack, over 100 people died and thousands were injured. As such, most Konoha ninjas had a friend or a relative who was injured in the attack. Fearing the worst, a few Suna ninjas gulped nervously. Don't tell me Konoha plans to eliminate all of us as revenge for our attack. Luckily, Arisa spoke softly but firmly. Get a hold of yourself. Don't forget that we are representing our village. Stop standing still like bloody fools and follow us. Led by Arisa and Yura's brave march, the others in the negotiation team found courage and followed their 2 new council members. Either that, or they were afraid of being left behind. Until the moment they set foot in Fire Capital, the entire group was watched like hawks by the Konoha ninjas. The members of the negotiation team let out a sigh of relief. They were finally out of danger, or so they thought. Just like Konoha's team, Suna's team was welcomed as well. However, there were some differences. Instead of the fire daimyo and dozens of nobles and officials welcoming them, they were greeted by a single noble who was in the fire daimyo's bad graces. In addition, there was no audience to cheer them. The noble welcomed them and led them to daimyo's palace. However, they were stared at hatefully once again, this time by ordinary citizens of Fire Capital who spotted them. Their looks conveyed the land of fire's disappointment, disgust, anger, and myriad other emotions due to Sunagakure's actions. The peace they enjoyed was nearly destroyed due to Sunagakure's folly. Yura sighed internally. This must be Konoha's play to put us on the back foot. We should have traveled here with the Wind Daimyo. Suddenly, he had a realization. He thought, wait, don't tell me this is why the Wind Daimyo refused to travel with us and left before we did. The Fire Daimyo must have conveyed him a message because Konoha couldn't do this had he been with us. Yura's mood became heavy. Arisa had the same realization. They finally realized how stacked the odds were against them. In complete silence, the Sunagakure group traveled to the daimyo's palace. They hadn't even entered it when they saw another scary sight. As unnerving as the gazes of thousands of Konoha ninjas were, this sight was downright horrifying. From the corner of their eyes, they noticed several chefs attending to a young man and serving him the best food Fire Capital could offer. In a daimyo's palace, such a sight would be considered ordinary. Unfortunately, there was nothing ordinary about that young man. One of the Suna ninjas involuntarily muttered, "Sand Slayer." Others wondered, why is he here? Wasn't that army enough? A few realized, don't tell me that is the same army Konoha used to attack Kusagakure rebels and Otagakure. Why did they move to the city? What is Konoha planning? While Fujin couldn't hear their thoughts, his ears picked up the soft mutters. He thought, Sand Slayer, huh? Sai, why are my enemies so much better at coming up with new monikers for me than my allies who are supposed to be some of the smartest people on this planet? Fujin let out a sigh, making the chef next to him very worried. He nervously asked, is the soup not to your liking? Fujin shook his head and said, "Don't worry, it's delicious. Make me a couple more bowls." The chef sighed in relief and immediately got to work. Meanwhile, the noble leading the Suna ninjas said, "The Wind Daimyo reached the city yesterday and is waiting inside. He said that he wanted to meet you as soon as you arrive, though it'll be understandable if you want to rest first." Needless to say, while he didn't like the Suna ninjas, they were ninjas at the end of the day, and very powerful ones when compared to an average ninja. Even though he was a noble and related to the Fire Daimyo, he wouldn't act haughtily in front of Sunagakure ninjas. Yura said, "We'll see Daimyo-sama first." While watching Fujin warily, the Suna ninjas entered the palace and followed the noble into a room where the two daimyo were talking with Hamura and Koharu while their samurai guards watchfully stood behind them. The Fire Daimyo turned his gaze towards the newcomers and said with a smile, "Welcome. It's good to see you here. I hope your journey went well. Come in and make yourself comfortable." The Wind Daimyo added, "Congrats on your recent promotions, Yura and Arisa. I have a lot of expectations from you too." Arisa replied, "Thank you, Daimyo-sama. We'll do our best for Sunagakure." Yura added, "Our journey went well." In his mind, Yura added, "Except the last few minutes." The Wind Daimyo said, "That's good. I hope you two can settle the differences between the two villages and we can maintain an alliance once again. While there were several other factors, no new great war has started ever since our two countries have maintained an alliance. Our citizens and even ninjas would like to see the peace maintained." The Wind Daimyo's tone had become extremely serious. While Sunagakure was damaged the most due to their attack, he would be the biggest loser if the two villages became hostile. So this matter was very personal to the Wind Daimyo. The Suna ninjas realized the same, and their moods became solemn. Their daimyo had already become a liability instead of an asset. Of course, they still had several plans to make use of the Wind Daimyo's personal interests. The Fire Daimyo laughed and said, "They've just arrived. It wouldn't be fair to make them negotiate today. Sauta will guide you to your staying arrangements. You can let him know if anything isn't up to your standard." After the welcome they had received, the Sunagakure ninjas wanted a break to reevaluate the situation and adjust their plans. They had no reason to refuse the offer. Yura immediately nodded, "Thank you, it would be appreciated." Under the gaze of the two daimyo and Konoha elders, the Sunagakure ninjas left the room. As soon as the door shut, the daimyo's faces became expressionless. The Fire Daimyo asked, "So what do you think?" Hamura answered, "I didn't sense any killing intent. It doesn't look like they have any plans to make a move against the two of you." The Wind Daimyo replied, "Perhaps, or they could have been intimidated by the two of you." Koharu shook her head and said, "No, we would have seen their intentions easily if they had any such plans and dropped them due to our presence. I can say for certain that they didn't plan on eliminating the two of you, or at least this group isn't responsible for or aware of it." Hamura added, "Besides, I doubt the two of us could stop suicidal attacks from over 20 ninjas by ourselves. On the contrary, they would have attempted to drag us along with themselves." The Fire Daimyo chuckled and guessed, "Maybe our young hero deterred them outside. We should be thankful that he agreed to stay in the palace and look after us old folks." Koharu's eye twitched as she thought, "If he had his way, then even the two of us wouldn't have been in this room. You two would have served as the perfect baits for Suna's doom." Hamura calmly said, "While he definitely would have made an impact on them, it wouldn't matter. Whoever tries to kill you will do so without any expectations of making it back alive. As I just said, it would be a suicide mission and Sunagakure would declare them rogue ninjas, so you can relax." The Wind Daimyo breathed a sigh of relief and muttered, "That's a relief. You have it easier here. Do you know how dangerous my position is in the land of wind?" The Fire Daimyo was left speechless at how his fellow daimyo complained. He could only say awkwardly, "Well, you're welcome to stay here for as long as you want." Without a hint of shame or hesitation, the Wind Daimyo replied, "I'll take you up on that offer then." Chapter 799, A New Alliance. "Lady Arisa, Lord Yura, I checked the rooms. There aren't any seals keeping a tab on us," the sealmaster in Sunagakure's group reported. After leaving the daimyo's palace, they were led to the second-best hotel in Fire Capital and settled there. Needless to say, they wouldn't blindly trust Konoha's arrangements and immediately inspected the place for traps and seals. While Sunagakure didn't dare to send a Fuinjutsu Grandmaster on this dangerous mission, they could spare a sealmaster who did most of the work. However, Arisa shook her head and said, "Good work, but it's hopeless. Ask everyone to act as if we're being kept watched at all times." The sealmaster frowned and asked, "What do you mean?" Realizing she had hurt his pride, Arisa explained, "It's not your fault. It's due to the reports we received from Kumagakure. Their Grandmaster failed to detect a trap set for their army and Kumagakure believes that Suzuki Fujin had a hand in that trap." Yura added, "We aren't sure how accurate the reports are, but if true, then even our Grandmasters could miss seals planted by Konoha." The sealmaster was shocked. He asked, "Then what do we do? How can we deal with someone who can fool grandmasters?" Arisa replied, "That's why I said what I did. Call everyone. We need to have a meeting. Konoha put up an excellent show today. I have to admit, I wouldn't have thought of so many tactics to apply pressure on our opponent. They have already entered our minds. We need to make sure that we don't get affected by it and negotiate as if we aren't in any danger. After all, it's not like we can do anything if they decide to kill us. The Sand Slayer alone can kill us silently if he wants to. So we might as well act as if we don't care about our lives and the danger that may appear. Only then can we get a good deal for our village." Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the sealmaster nodded and immediately left. Sunagakure's negotiation team began their first meeting in Fire Capital. For obvious reasons, they didn't discuss or revise their tactics and strategies during this particular mission. Instead, Yura and Arisa focused on the mental state of their subordinates. They worked on removing their fear and nervousness and ensured that they stayed sharp throughout the negotiations. "Reikage-sama, the damage done to our trading routes by the hurricanes is finally fixed. However," Mabui's expression dulled as she reported, "I'm afraid this will have a major impact on our trade. The hurricanes that appeared a month ago had caused extensive damage, much of which is yet to be repaired. It scared all the traders and merchants. The matter of our missing ninjas and Akuro's attack only amplified that fear. It took a lot of effort to make them start trading in our country again. However, these hurricanes will deter them once again. I'm afraid that nearly 80% of our trade will be impacted for a month or two. If such incidents occur again, then it could be even longer." Ai's mood wasn't good. He was still being harassed constantly by the families of the ninjas that went missing in the land of rice. His new policy regarding Fujin wasn't taken well by the ninjas either. The ones who didn't want to see him in power or curtail his arrogance were also bringing back the issue of the previous missing ninjas and the humiliation inflicted by Akuro. As a result, his time was absolutely miserable. I muttered, "I didn't think a few hurricanes would impact us so much." However, there is still the question of why so many strong hurricanes are constantly forming. A frown appeared on his face as he said, "I have a nagging suspicion that something about these weather patterns isn't natural. It's as if someone is trying to hurt us. Mabui, dispatch a group of meteorologists to the places where the hurricanes originated. Send a couple of ambush squads with each group. At the same time, convey to the merchant groups not to trade in the country unless it is essential. Let them know that we are looking into the unpredictable weather. Even though our economy will suffer, it is better to suffer hardship in the short term than lose their trust and suffer in the long run." Mabui worriedly replied, "Reikage-sama, you're already under pressure due to the recent events. If we stop trade at this moment, the pressure will intensify further, and it'll give more ammunition to the ones who find you an eyesore." I scoffed and said, "Don't worry. No matter how much they try, they can't touch my seat. This is just a temporary hurdle. As for the troublemakers, let them scheme as much as they want. Once the matter cools down, I'll settle everything quickly and efficiently. Just keep track of who is fanning the flames." Mabui nodded and was about to leave when an Anbu ninja knocked and entered the room. She reported, "Reikage-sama, a Sunagakure squad has arrived in the village. They claim that they want to discuss some important matters with you." I replied, "Took them long enough. I'm surprised they waited this long after that disastrous loss." Mabui replied, "Perhaps they were apprehensive due to us disregarding their previous invitation." I snorted and said, "After that disastrous attack, I don't think so. They likely just assumed that I'd act regardless of whether they contacted me or not. Send them here." Unlike the squad Sunagakure sent to Iwagakure, which traveled directly to the hidden village, the squad dispatched to Kumagakure had to move around the entire Land of Fire to avoid running into the spirited Konoha ninjas and creating more trouble for Sunagakure. Since they moved through the minor villages, which were allied with Konoha, they had to move very carefully. Hence, they needed over 6 days to reach Kumagakure. While I discussed possible avenues of cooperation with the Sunagakure ninjas and analyzed how reliable Sunagakure could be, Anoki was pondering over his meetings with Sunagakure and Kumagakure squads. Since Iwagakure was the only village that hadn't been hit recently, Anoki held the key to any possible alliance between the three great villages. While Sunagakure worked in the background to find a common ground between them, Iwagakure and Kumagakure, their 2 new council members sat in a room along with the 24 members of their negotiation team on one side of a large table. Opposite them was the Konoha's negotiation team, led by the 2 elders, Hamura and Koharu, 3 clan leaders, Hiramasa, Inoichi, and Tsume and Suzuki Fujin, the representative of civilian ninjas in Konoha. Along with them were 18 other members, most of whom had accompanied Fujin and Hamura to Kusagakyo. Separating these two groups were the Fire Daimyo and the Wind Daimyo, who sat on opposite ends as well, with a couple of trusted samurais protecting each. The talks here would decide whether Konoha and Sunagakyo would mend their ties, or whether the two villages would go to war. Our two villages have been in an alliance since the end of the Third Great Ninja War. During this time, no conflict broke out between us. In addition, our alliance deterred Kumagakyo and Iwagakyo from starting a new war. Hamura started the discussion by emotionlessly putting the facts on the table. He continued, "Neither dared to attack you when you were vulnerable after the previous Great War due to us. In addition, neither dared to attack us when we were weakened by the Nine Tails assault. In a way, our alliance ensured that the next Great Ninja War didn't break out, and it maintained peace in the ninja world." His tone became cold as he stated, "Yet you broke our alliance. You allied with a traitor and assaulted Konoha. Your actions destabilized the world and nearly pushed us into the next Great Ninja War. More importantly, nearly 200 of our people died. And my dear friend and our beloved Hokage was gravely injured." Without a shred of mercy or hesitation, Hamura asked, "Give me one good reason why Konoha shouldn't dispatch our armies and wipe out Sunagakyo from the face of this world." Just like Hiruzen and Danzo, Hamura's strength had waned with age. Coupled with the fact that he was never as strong as those two, he was no longer considered a great ninja or a major threat. However, the pressure and the killing intent he released this day made all 24 Sunagakyo ninjas, other than Yura and Arisa, tremble. Irrespective of whether they were Chunins or Jounins, their expressions became grave, and their instincts forced them to raise their guard even though they knew Hamura wouldn't make a move. Even Arisa and Yura could feel Hamura's experience in the pressure he was exerting. Even though either could go toe-to-toe with him easily, they were nowhere near in terms of experience. The two daimyos, who had a few plans to act as mediators since neither wanted another war, were dead silent and neither dared to move a muscle. While Hamura's chakra wasn't directed at them, they were just ordinary people irrespective of their status. The pressure terrified them regardless of who it was directed at. Without a word, both decided to stay quiet throughout the meeting. Chapter 800, Refusal to Accept Responsibility. It hadn't been even a minute since the negotiations began, but the room was already tense. Hamura's display unnerved most of the Sunagakyo ninjas. Suddenly, Yura and Arisa riled their chakra to counter Hamura's pressure. Yura asked, "Do you mean other than the fact that you can't?" Arisa asked, "Does Konoha dare to step into the desert? Perhaps you've forgotten what happened in the Second Great Ninja War." Their chakra brought relief to the other Sunagakyo ninjas who were facing the heat. Of course, neither dared to exert pressure on the Konoha side. Both knew very well what the result would be if they tried to do so. Even if Fujin was ignored, Konoha's side was considerably stronger, with as many as 5 ninjas at the elite Jounin level, even though 3 were very old. Tsum bared her fangs and asked, "Would you like us to try again?" Unlike Hamura, she didn't apply any pressure or direct her killing intent at the Sunagakyo ninjas. Instead, she stopped restraining her bloodlust. Even the weaker Konoha ninjas felt nauseated by her display, let alone the Sunagakyo ninjas who knew the bloodlust was meant for them. There were 2 other casualties who suffered the most and had to fight very hard not to puke due to her horrible aura. While they succeeded, they cursed themselves for poking their nose into this matter instead of enjoying their lavish lives. Cough! Just when the tension seemed to reach a breaking point, a cough echoed in the room. Accompanying the cough were strange winds that eliminated all sorts of auras in the room. Be it Hamura, Tsum, Arisa, or Yura, everyone's presence and bloodlust were suppressed. The Konoha ninjas turned their heads while Sunagakyo ninjas became even more nervous despite the absence of the bloodlust. In a moment, everyone looked at Fujin. Fujin calmly said, "We are here for negotiations. There is no need to declare a war before even discussing the matter civilly." His words calmed down the Sunagakyo ninjas. However, before they could completely relax, Fujin turned his gaze towards them and said, "Besides, if need be, I'll just pay a visit to Sunagakyo. I'm sure you guys wouldn't mind, would you?" A slight smile appeared on Fujin's lips as he asked the question. Needless to say, every Sunagakyo ninja understood the true meaning behind his words. Yura thought, while rank S ninjas are a threat and play a significant role in wars, a single ninja can't effect a huge war without the support of massive armies. However, he can't be treated as an ordinary rank S ninja. Not only does he have techniques that can kill over 100 ninjas in one go, but he also has a strong flying summon, which would allow him to attack and retreat at will. The only way to stop such a ninja is Fuinjutsu traps, but he is already a grandmaster in that field too, and a rather terrifying one. If Konoha wants to cause us pain, then he alone can cause us a lot of harm, just like how Iwagakure suffered at the hands of the fourth Hokage. Other than Sunagakure, there wouldn't be a single safe space in the land of wind. Not to mention, he could even attack Sunagakure and escape if we don't maintain a barrier around the village. Arisa and Yura were made aware of the threat Fujin posed by their council. Since their war plans involved slowing down Konoha armies in the vast deserts, Fujin was a bigger threat than even the Sanins and Hiruzen, so they had to be very careful with their words. The daimyos were relieved that things finally calmed down. The fire daimyo thought, "I thought the two elders would be the voice of reason, while youngsters like Fujin would be passionate about going to war." However, the exact opposite is happening. First refusing the offer to become the fifth Hokage and now calming both sides, Suzuki Fujin has a lot of potential. At the same time, Hiramasa thought in amusement, to make the ones in favor of peace take a hard stand while the ones in favor of war advocate for peace. What a fine strategy you recommended, Shikaku. A unique way to negotiate while ensuring both sides in the village are happy. Of course, there is a hidden danger that one side isn't satisfied by the effort of the others and changes their stance midway. While that can be countered by the other side taking their original stance, such a change should be detrimental to us. However, a change that abrupt and drastic would be incredibly confusing and unnerving for Sunagakure's team. Ironically, that'll give us an upper hand instead of putting us on the back foot. In all the decades I have been a part of the council, I have never seen such a strange strategy. Of course, the real reason for such a strategy is so that Fujin could make a favorable impression. After all, no one wants a warmonger to become the Hokage. Just like Lord Third, Shikaku also wants to see Fujin become the Hokage in the future. The two are quite considerate about his reputation and image. After calming herself, Arisa smiled and said, "If a distinguished young ninja like you wants to visit our village, we wouldn't have any reason to decline. If our youngsters consider you as their role model, no one would be more happy than me. However, you're correct, our talks didn't start perfectly." She turned her gaze to Hamura and continued, "Considering what happened, I can understand your rage. However, your words were too provoking for us not to reply. Regardless, I apologize for the way we replied. You're correct. This war was a terrible event. However, your anger is misplaced. While Konoha suffered losses, we weren't unharmed either. You lost nearly 200 citizens. We lost 625 elite ninjas. Your Hokage is injured, while our Kazekage is dead. No matter how you look at it, we suffered far more. If this was due to our folly, then Sunagakure would have been the first one to acknowledge our mistake, offer unconditional apologies to Konoha, and accept all your terms to ensure that peace prevailed. However, that isn't the case. We were forced into the war against our will. Despite the opposition of our council and elders, Lord Fourth adamantly launched an assault on Konoha. He didn't even give our ninjas any time to prepare, and considering our good relations, most of our ninjas were unwilling to fight. Our council vehemently opposed the war, but Lord Fourth shrugged off all our opposition by claiming that our village's poor financial condition was due to Konoha taking most of our missions. Even though we felt that his behavior was odd, he was our leader. We couldn't disobey him or his orders. Arisa let out a sorrowful sigh as she continued. Looking back, it is obvious that Lord Fourth was already killed by Orochimaru, and Sunagakure fell to Orochimaru's scheme. He must have used the Edo Tensei Jutsu to reanimate and control Lord Fourth and fooled Sunagakure into attacking our ally and putting the village in danger. While we suspected something fishy, we never thought of Konoha's Edo Tensei Jutsu because we believed the reanimated ninjas didn't retain their strength. Not to mention, the thought that someone killed and replaced Lord Fourth so secretly was too outrageous. Yura agreed with his fellow council member and added, "So, it's not just Konoha, but we have been victims as well. If our villages go to war, then we'll just be falling into Orochimaru's scheme. Even though you eliminated his pet village, he'll still end up winning." Needless to say, Sunagakure wouldn't give up the opportunity Orochimaru provided them to absolve themselves of all responsibilities. While it would ruin Rasa's reputation, his reputation had already been dragged through the mud. It also portrayed Sunagakure's council as incompetent, but they didn't mind it. On the contrary, they gave full permission to Yura and Arisa to portray them as incompetent if it could prevent Sunagakure from falling into a war they desperately wanted to avoid. In addition, Arisa also mentioned the Wind Daimyo's tilt towards Konoha harming their economy, a matter they hoped to change while putting Konoha on the back foot at the same time. Despite the good argument by the Sunagakure side, there wasn't any change in the expression on Konoha's side. Fujin thought, As we expected, they chose this option. It was just too convenient not to use it. Koharu coldly replied, "So, not only did you attack us, but you also want not to accept any responsibility for your actions." Yura was about to reply when Hamura added, "I have to admit, this was an excellent excuse. If luck was on your side, I would have accepted it and convinced my comrades to go easy on you. However, you overlooked one important aspect.